to the FY 2020 Finance Committee and Selectmen Budget Review. And we'll be starting off with Treasurer Budget, Steve Benuti. Welcome, Steve.
Morning. This is something I'm not used to. I'm used to being last on the schedule. Being first is something.
The Red Sox aren't even playing, right?
First on have the treasurer stuff in front of you is debt service. Debt service is what it is. We've added to our debt service over the past couple of years with alumni in the fire station and the Foxborough Road van purchase. Those are in full right now. We also have some funds in there for potential library, potential sewer project, potential road vans, because we have authorizations for those. So we have to make sure we have the funds to pay in case we move forward with those projects.
Tony, can you just warrant, where are we?
First tab.
Tab, first
Tab
tab.
one?
Yep, we're going in order of.
I'm not, okay, so that's all the debt, and that's what we're looking
Yep.
at here? Okay, sorry.
The next section is fringe benefits.
Excuse me, Steve,
Yes.
you said that there is something in here for the sewers, potentially for the library. Where is that and how much is it?
Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly. It just feeds
It's
into
pay down
the
to
sheet.
capital,
Yeah.
that first line.
Okay. All right,
And that includes the dams for the road work.
okay.
That's in the 885 number?
So, okay, so that's 285, in the incremental 285, that's Thank you.
Could you answer that again, for me?
So in that first line of the ban pay down for capital, we have some roadway bans that we have to pay down this year. And in addition,
Steve.
there's an amount in there to cover any interest that we might owe on sewer for short-term borrowing, as well as, what other pay downs do we have? There's a small pay down too for the,
No, it's the road bans plus the authorization that we have taken down, but
On the
there's
road, right.
potential
Yes.
that we may.
Okay.
And you said library was in here also?
no,
Oh, it's
No,
not.
there is some for the library.
There is some for the library.
interest.
So that very first line on the very first page of the very first tab, $885,200
Yep.
is band pay downs
Yeah.
for road bands, a bit of alumni and interest for the library.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Fringe benefits, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the retirement system after we go through the budget. But that's up the normal 6.5%, and we'll talk about the funding schedule for the pension plan in just a second. Medical, this is a little deceiving, the $5 million to $4.9 million because of the conversion to munis. An encumbrance from last year that was set aside for a disabled firefighter shows up as a budget appropriation here, so it's in the medical things. The actual increase to medical payments is around 10.5%. We had good experience last year. The premium increase was actually 0 last year. But we've seen a little tick up in our experience for this coming year, so we're just putting some funds aside, plus it always seems that we pick up plans during the year instead of losing plans with spouses leaving jobs and things like that. So there's some funds in there for that also. And in the mission budget, there's a little bit more money. There's $5,170,000 set aside for additions to staff that may come in. So this is kind of a fluid number. We won't know the exact amount of our medical increases until around February. And the new plan year starts June 1st for medical.
Okay, so the 4,979
is actually 4.6, I believe.
Okay, so
Right.
10% on 4.6 is about 450, 460,000 increase
Yep.
is what, okay.
In the next section now, in the tax title, it's the usual 10,000 in there. It's any legal fees that we incur in dealing with our foreclosures the town has. Transfer section is kind of still fluid. We still need to go through the free cash exercise, and the policy that you guys just approved with the selectmen says that we need to do that exercise each year, so those numbers will change. One of the things that should point out is the debt exclusion stabilization account. Bonnie and I really need to go through and think about this. We have, I think there's like 3 alternatives we can go through. But if you recall, what we've been doing is using this fund to bring down the level of debt service, the excluded debt. Right now, we're up to FY '23, I believe, so we have a level debt service up to '23. With potential, we could continue that, and what we've been doing is increasing that each year, so this will bring us out to FY '24, and we put the funds aside to cover us for that, so that's alternative 1. Alternative 2 is to take the library into consideration, because we're looking like that needs to be an exclusion vote. Bringing that in there and trying to maybe limit the first couple of years of the debt service payments that needs to be done, so build this account up, bring that debt service down to a little better level, and just let the rest flow. Or a third alternative is to build up this account and limit the amount of debt that we're actually going to borrow, so pay it down right before we're going to bond it, which in my mind is probably the best alternative. It may not be the biggest splash up front, but in the long run, it's probably going to make the most sense. So Bonnie and I will take a look at that, but that's still a number in flux, depending on what we want to do with that. The treasurer's, the next one down, the transfer to trust funds, that's our OPEB required payment, the $1.9 million. It looks like it's down from the previous year because of the extra that comes in from the free cash computation, so that number will probably go up again. And I'll talk a little bit more about OPEB in a second. The treasurer's budget, it's basically flat except for step increases for everybody. There is one change to the staff salaries. Down below, you see a $20,000 increase. Bonnie and I were sharing an employee, Cindy's salary. I had 25 hours of her. Bonnie was picking up 10. It's a job that's been like that for 10, 12 years before I got there. It's part of the job now. She does do some accounting things, but it's part of her job. So I'm picking up all 35 hours now, so there'll be an increase in Bonnie's
So you'll
numbers.
see that in my budget.
So we're just shifting those hours. There is one change
So
in
you're
the
making,
mission.
you're making your boss look good.
Yes, she'll have a budget decrease, and I'm taking the hit for it.
That's good.
The mission budget, I do have an additional 5 hours for our HR systems administrator. That's Carol. Carol does all the onboarding for new employees. She does benefit enrollments. She does enrollments with all the vendors itself, all the retirement associations. She pays all the bills for those vendors, and she's taken on more duties with the actual payroll setup each week and all the adjustments that happens with that. With the conversion to Munis, Ann's time has kind of been dedicated to that, so it's kind of 5 hours that we're going to need going through with this. And might as well talk about a little bit about the Munis conversion as we're going along. We're converted on the finance side, although Bonnie still has tweaks that she needs to be getting done. The payroll side has been going on for probably 6 months now. We've delayed it once. We were supposed to be converted with the payroll from yesterday. It was supposed to be at first, but we were nowhere close to being ready. Right now, it's set for April 1st to have a conversion there. We'll probably know by the end of this month whether we need to delay it a little further. But it is so different and so much more involved than what we have right now. Then there's just Ann and I basically running this thing.
So is it better? You get more things, or why is it?
You get
so much
more
com-
bang for your buck, but getting there is,
So once you're there, I mean, is it also still a lot more work? I'm just curious as to why it's so different.
maintenance-wise, it'll be a little bit more intensive. It does a lot more. What we have now is simply payroll.
Mhm.
You run a payroll check. This is more of an HR system. So there's a lot more bells and whistles and things we can do.
But
Actually, benefit enrollment through there, we have a system where somebody could put their time in on their cell phone and bring it in, so
But
there's
one-
so many things we can do.
one can presume that the upfront time is what's going to be the big time, and it's in all likelihood, once people
Yes.
adapt to it, it's going to be more streamlined and have all those other
Oh, absolutely.
bells and whistles.
The difference between the payroll and what we saw in the accounting side, we could roll it out as long as we could cut every check, we were okay. And, Bonnie could take care of all the things in the background with it. This is, we're dealing with employees' payroll checks, the first one, we issue that's wrong. We're not gonna let that happen. so-
It may make you aware of it.
Yeah, so that's why we've already postponed once and possibility of another postponement. We'll have to see what goes on.
Steve, I don't want to
Yes,
digress
sir.
too far into munis in the payroll, but I do have one question that comes to bear on the budget. Will it allow us to track, if you look at the recreational marijuana requirements, right, 3% of sales can be, if we can tie it to the recreational marijuana dispensaries that may come to town, we can collect that money from the dispensaries or from the growers or whoever. Will this allow us to track the time associated with a particular task or a particular expenditure category for a single person, so that we can tie time and monies to what a recreational marijuana dispensary or grow facility is
As long as we
consuming in
can
terms of time
track that,
resources?
there is something in the payroll system that you can allocate to certain accounts. So as long as we're able to track it up front and we know that we want to capture this person's, time spent on doing this with that
Okay.
project. Yes, we
Because
can.
I think that's going to be a challenge for us to capture that 3%, maximum 3% associated with the marijuana facility. So I want to make sure we're thinking about now, how do we maximize that 3%? And I think a lot of it's going to come back to showing the time that town employees are using that's dedicated to those.
As long as it's tracked up front, yes,
Okay.
the system can handle it. We'll put those funds aside.
So, but, again, not to go down this, now, I hadn't even gone this, so what kind of things are you talking about? Because I'm not, you're not envisioning police officers and so on tracking their time, what they're working on, right? Or are you?
Potentially. I mean, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of what monies the town expends can be counted against the HCA that we could potentially put in place. My understanding of what the CCC requires is that it's got to be related to the recreational marijuana facility in some way. Now, that could be time that police officers are spending, but I also envision that could be time that the town administrator's office is dealing with complaints. It could be time that town council is spending associated with negotiating the HCA. I think it could be a lot of different things, and we're going to have to be flexible in how we adjust and deal with it, but it could be a significant amount of money, and it could be worth our time to make sure up front that we can track that time.
Thank you.
The last part of the munis conversion is the real estate taxes and things that happen in the tax collector's office. We've done the first pass of the data up to the system. So they've converted back to 2006 on the real estate, so there's a nice history going there. Bonnie has associated transactions that happened to general ledger accounts, which wasn't a small project to do. So now we just have to go through the data, scrub it. So that's on track for a September, I think, conversion. we're just starting that process now. You can see our time is kind of between 3 buckets right now, so it's a little hectic.
So how much time do you two spend on this conversion?
Most of my day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the vast majority of our time is conversion related.
And it's just because you have to build this system, you build the architecture before you can run it. So you build it, you test it, you figure out the bugs, you test it again, and then once you get it working and trained, now you have to build it in live. So you get to do it twice.
Yeah. It's been a fun process. No other questions? So there's 5 hours additional on our mission.
So if you look at the first 2 pages, it's just a summary of the level staffing. If you go to the second 2 pages of that tab, you'll see the mission requests. And what I did is just put the mission ones out separately, so you don't have to scroll through every number and figure out where, the additional requests are for. So you'll see the additional staff on the page 2 of that other one. And I've also adjusted the fringe for the medical health insurance and Medicare in case the staffing increases that are requested throughout the budget are approved. So we are putting them in play.
What are you referencing? I'm sorry.
So the first 2 pages where Steve was going through the debt,
Yep.
go to the second 2 pages, and you'll see the sheets that look like this.
So it's
So that's kind of like.
One more, Chuck, one more.
Level staffing.
There you go.
There you go. So all of the health insurance is increased for any staffing increases that are requested throughout the budget, along with the Medicare, and you'll see Steve's additional 5 hours that he asked for at the bottom.
So this drives the numbers that Steve spoke to. Okay.
And do these include the numbers that the schools gave us yesterday?
Yeah.
One of the things, the only chance I get to talk about pension and OPEB is at this meeting, so we'll have a quick little pension talk, since it is a very big number. We just had a valuation of the pension plan as of 1/1/18. That came out, valuations are done every 2 years by the county retirement system. Our unfunded, our accrued liability, so this is what we owe our employees, what we're setting aside for our employees right now, is $59.9 million. That's up from the last valuation of $7 million. A lot of that increase is for existing employees. We've had a lot of staff over the past couple of years, both in the school system and the town. So that's up $4.3 million to $31.8 million from where it was. So that's a big number. It's included in the 59, so this is just a breakout of the 59. Retirees at $25.8 million, that's up $2.8 million over the 2-year period. The good news is our unfunded liability has stayed the same at $22 million. So we've gone from about 64% unfunded to 73% unfunded, which is a pretty decent thing. The pension plan has a program in place to be fully funded by FY35. It's a long way out, but it's been a bogey that we've set probably 6 or 7 years ago, and we've stuck to it. The way that the plan is set up is that we're going to have so many years at a 6.5% increase, and then it goes down to a 4% increase. What's happened is, as things change through the evaluation reports, those 6.5% years just get extended. The FY35 is still a hard date that we're keeping to. So right now, we're going to see 6.5% increases to FY29. That's probably about 5 years more than the last valuation report. And 2 things really pushed that number out. First thing was the assumed rate of return on the plan. Started off at 8%. Probably about 10 years ago, and it's been coming down. We've been going in 8% increments. For this valuation report, the Retirement Association felt that 0.25% was more prudent to do at this point. So we're down to 7.5% right now. The goal is to get that number down to 7. So we're going to see that number go down. As that number goes down, the liability goes up because you're earning less, so you owe more, basically.
Steve, is the FY '35 date, did we impose that, or is that being driven somewhere else?
The law says FY 37 or 38, I believe. The retirement system has the goal of 35.
Okay, with what penalty,
No penalty.
if it doesn't happen? Just curious what the, say a town doesn't, say heck with it, doesn't follow through.
They've never said, but they would.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, eventually, the rating companies will look at it as, a measurement of other towns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
comparative.
I was just curious, because I know that all communities probably won't.
A lot of it depends if the state can make that date, because if the state can't make that date,
I got you.
you know it's going to be pushed out with
Okay.
legislation. So just
We're on
follow
track.
whatever the state does, basically.
Steve, question for you.
Yes, sir.
When we hit 2035 and say we've got that funded, what happens after that?
We just pay the normal, once we're fully funded, it's just the normal cost. The normal cost is what it takes for the current employees, that's you're paying year by year, then basically,
you have
whatever
a-
the current employees
Do you have a
portion of
projection
that.
of what that would be?
Right now, the normal cost is $608,000.
Versus what?
Easy to swallow.
2.247.
It's around 160.
That's what we paid this current year.
Mhm.
2.371, I'm sorry, 2.37.
Holy moly.
That's not-
That's a long way off.
Sure is, but it's still.
Boy, that'll help the budget though in 30.
Spending that windfall already in my mind.
I see another turf field coming.
We can recover
The
it.
second thing that pushed that, so that was one factor that pushed those 6.5 years out. The second was that the retirement eligibility to COLA increase. Right now, it's based on the first $14,000 of somebody's pension, there was the annual COLA increase is based on that. This year, the increase was like 3% on that 14,000. They've upped it to 16,000, so it would be a COLA payment on the first 16,000 of somebody's retirement. It's actually in line somewhere with the other retirement systems in the state. It's not the highest, it's not the lowest, it's right in between that 16,000. That added 2 years to that 6.5. So it doesn't sound like much, it's like $400, but it compounds each year. And then you're putting aside for somebody just coming into the system, and you have to make up for all that money, so it's an extra 2 years. They haven't increased that in probably about 10 years or so. So it's time for them to take a look at it. On the OPEB side of things, we continue to put money aside. We have a fund right now with assets of $11.5 million as of November 30th. Saw what happened to the stock market in December, so that went down a bit. We haven't gotten the December numbers in yet, but I'm pretty sure that we didn't have a very good December on that. For total return on our assets, we've gone over the $2 million mark in total return, so we've put in, as a town and light department and water department, $9.5 million, and we've had $2 million of earnings on that since inception through December, because I was able to get the earnings piece of the December numbers. Since inception, we're at 4.7% annualized return since 2008, so it's not bad considering what happened this year. So this year, we were down a little over 5%. Our bogey, in this case, on our OPEB funds, is 6.7%, I believe, for the town. The light department's at 7.5%. So we missed not only the 6.7, but we're down 5%, so that's like a 13% miss that we had on our open funds. So that liability, the next valuation is going to go up. And that valuation is done at the end of this fiscal year.
Okay, great.
Okay?
Not that it isn't a fascinating topic, but we've got to move on.
I got you. I'm done.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
And Chief, you can go up. You've got 6 minutes. And,
Well, first of all, welcome to my baptism of the budget. Glad you guys could join me this morning on Saturday. So, I'm going to start with the dispatch budget first, and run over it from there. So the animal control and the crossing guard, those are wages that are not going to change anytime soon. We contract with Foxborough in regards to animal control. We have for many years now, I guess, and it works well for us. For us to get rid of the animal control at this point in time, it means that the officers have to respond. We have to then care for the dog, we have to house them. It just makes more sense to push it out. Cities like Fitchburg, towns like Lunenburg have all gone privatization of that. I compared the numbers for what we're paying, for what they're going to be paying, and it's all privately funded, and I wouldn't want to do that to our community. Crossing guard, as you know, we took Millie off of 2A. She's now at the crossing at Shaker Lane. We had an influx of young kids walking to school out there. We thought the need was up there better. We've allocated one of the school resource officers to go down there in the morning. They do the morning traffic down there, and in the afternoon, we have one of the officers that's working patrol switch up. There's been a few glitches once in a while, obviously because of call volume. There's only 2 officers on, we have an accident or a domestic or something going on. Obviously it takes precedence over school traffic. Helen doesn't like that, but we get by. So to talk about the dispatch, I'm actually going to pass this around for you guys to look at. To talk about the dispatch, really not a big change. It looks like a large change, but if you remember, we added 2.2 bodies on to the dispatch center. We're now 2 bodies, 7 a.m. until 11 p.m. And the open shifts, we hired 3 right now, 3 per diem dispatchers. We have one part-time dispatcher, Michael Ray, who's been picking up a lot of the shifts. He's in college, and he gets here by 3 o'clock and is able to fill in. It's a win-win for us.
On the dispatch budget, just so you're aware, that $310,000 figure there for salaries, that was the 2 additional dispatchers that were added in November. So the budget is reflective of adding them in November. So the level staffing budget for next year is reflective of a 12-month add. So that's why the increase is $400,000.
yeah.
Everything else is contractual in regards to that. Police department-wise, as we look at the budget itself, the only major increase we had at this point, it's actually like a 6.2% increase overall. Contractual obligations, lines, steps. But the one of the big things that actually went up was in regards to subscriptions. That'll be, that's going to go up to, I believe.
Yeah, if you go to the second page, you'll see the mission requested versus the level staffing. So you can see the items there.
So the mission is $19,152 for you guys. That's due to a lot of our associations that we belong to. With NEMLEC, SEMLEC, C4RJ, Communities for Restorative Justice, IACP, NASRO. A lot of those have all increased over the years and haven't been addressed as to subscription as to what we need to pay for. This year,
So how have we been paying for them?
I believe it's coming out of.
They've been paying for it, but they've had to adjust other budget items to absorb it.
Okay, so we are paying 19 and change.
No, right now we're paying about 15, just under 16,000. Unfortunately, this year, NEMLEC and restorative justice are both going up about $3,000.
So it's not incremental associations, it's cost per association that's driving it. Okay.
Level services essentially. Level services essentially.
Essentially.
The fees are going up.
Yes.
So, given that though, I mean, should the level staffing budget really be last year's number? Because you actually spent more than that last year, right?
Right. So I would say that, you know, the directive was to have a level funded expense line. So put it in the mission budget, but it's really level service if we're looking at it. You know, where we should be. I would argue that it should be in the level staffing, because it's a cost increase that they need to pay. They have to have the association memberships.
I mean, I would argue if it's in the level staffing, then, and we're paying it out of other funds, it ends up being a zero-sum
It's in
change.
the- yeah, right.
Because it should come out of some other fund than we're currently using.
Right.
So the other portion of mission budget, which the two boards that are here today have heard me pounding my fist over and over again in regards to the adding a second school resource officer. I think everybody here knows how passionate I am about having a second school resource officer, about having a second body within the school district, but also adding a 20th body to our police department. If you look at some of those graphs that I provided you with today, the first one you'll see, the first graph that's going to come up for you first is in regards to our traffic. There's been a steady increase in traffic. We're now at full staff at 19, and to have a traffic offense, a total of 2647 is, again, it's increasing each year, and it's not going to go down. That number's not going to go down.
Chief, are you doing more patrolling to have more offenses, or is this just kind of,
It's a
nothing's changed and the numbers are just going up?
It's a little bit of both. We do have some younger officers that are a little more aggressive that are doing some motor vehicle stops. But as far as accidents and call volume for traffic complaints, obviously I hit a hot button with the truck exclusion on Taylor Street.
Good job.
How we're doing that. We've been enforcing a lot of the speed limit signs that have gone by the wayside that needed some attention. We've assigned one of the sergeants directly to traffic complaints so that we can address them as they come in, rather than just say, oh yeah, grab some radar on this road. He puts out a plan every week.
Chief, how does that change if we do in fact implement a town-wide speed limit and probably drop a lot of our roads? Do you anticipate that changing even further? I know that's something that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And is on your agenda to address.
Chase, you're absolutely correct. If we drop and we decide to go with a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit throughout town, except for posted roads, that's going to open up enforcement a large amount.
Okay.
Roads that are 35 and people are doing 40 on, we're probably not getting stopped on. But roads that are 25 and they're doing 40 on, we're going to be stopping. So it's going to increase those traffic violations, those traffic
Well, the good
stops.
thing about that is the fines will be higher. Increase revenue.
On the traffic offenses, Chief, do you have a sense of how much of this is 495 related and how much of it is internal to the town on the traffic
So we
increase?
don't, most of our stops.
These are all the offenses, correct? So the offenses, 98% are all on.
Town roads
our
or state roads?
We don't write citations out on 495. We do go out there, we support the fire department.
If there's
when
an
they go out
offense,
there
it's
for
usually the
motor
state
vehicle
police that
crash.
handle that.
But
Any
state
motor
police
vehicle
handle
accidents,
the
those
citations.
numbers are all pulled through the state police. We don't have any
Okay.
accidents. We don't, well, I don't say we have any, 99.5%.
So these increases here are independent of 495?
And Route 2,
Yeah.
The next one is dispatch log calls by year. It starts, and we did 2015 and went up. You'll see there's a dip in 2017. If you remember in 2017, we had a couple officers that were out injured for quite a while. And we were short 2 officers at that point in time. So in order for us to have dispatch calls, there was no activity. It was at a low, whereas you'll see in 2018, it goes back up to 16,457. It's just over the last 3 months that we're actually back at full staffing. but there is another reason why this number in 2018 is low. In 2016, every time the fire department or ambulance goes to a call, police goes to the call. Well, the dispatch center, with only having one person in there, they weren't actually logging the police going to that call. So whether fire has 1,000 calls, 2,000 calls a year, that number would increase to 18,000 if it's logged properly. As of January 1, we changed the procedure in dispatch, and we'll track it, and that number next year, we should have a good read on it, where we're actually at for call volume.
As of January 1 this year, you changed it, or last year?
No.
19?
It'll be generated starting
2 days,
last
3
week,
days.
yeah,
3
through
days
the
ago.
day.
Okay, got it.
Exactly. So next year, when I'm here in front of you, you'll have different numbers. I hope. And the last graph that I put together that I really wanted you guys to take note of is calls to the point by year of its inception. And again, our call volume is not as high, but I want you to see that out of those 800 calls, we're going to the point for 800 of those, which means the town and the rest of the community is not getting the services they need, especially when we have just 2 officers working. Something we have implemented is when there is only 2 officers on, or on a Friday or Saturday night, we're trying to use the part-time reserve pool to backfill for 2 purposes. 1, it gets an extra body out on the road, and 2, it keeps the part-time officers fresh and current with the laws, and so they don't get a status quo. We want them to perform as if a full-time officer was there performing. We're very fortunate that 3 of our part-timers were full-time officers that went down to part-time status, so they've been trained fully all the way. So we keep them working, and they're happy. It's not as much of a burden on our budget as it is, but
Ballpark, can you break down the percentage of what type of calls are they? And are they spread through the 24 hours? Are they when the movie gets out or when the bar closes down?
so it's funny, it was someone asked me, I think it was Gary was asking me this morning, what kind of calls we actually put up there. And they're anything from a motor vehicle lockout to a drunk in the parking lot to a crash accident to someone who's suspended license who gets stopped on the way up there in the point itself. Larcenies that are happening at Market Basket or a paper store, any of those. Any disorderly persons. The weekend before Christmas, we had 4 arrests at the point itself. I believe the answer was 'tis the season. So,
Misunderstanding.
simple misunderstanding. So the reason I put that together is my mission budget is I am asking for a school resource officer, and I think everybody knows exactly how passionate I am about that school resource officer. But it's also about getting a second officer, not only in the schools, but another officer into our town to assist with what we have going on. School's not in session every single day. There's school vacations, there is nighttime, there is all summer long that I can use that extra body. And what I'd like to see in our goal is to have that school resource officer transform into a traffic officer when school's not in session. As you can see, our traffic offenses are going up, and I think it would be a good utilization of that extra body.
Chief, can I ask you one question? SRO. Would that SRO just be staying at the middle school? I guess, what's the function of the 2 offices?
So, in that presentation I did, I showed exactly how I wanted to portray it. We would have 1, which is our school resource officer now, be stationed at the high school during school time, taking care of that morning traffic, and also taking care of Shaker Lane School, making an appearance down there. The second SRO would be stationed at the middle school. Obviously, they're here full-time in the police department, but they'll be going to the middle school, and they'll be also attending the other campus of the Russell Street Elementary School. And we took care of that whole campus down there. So we have 1 officer for that whole campus. Officer Wazinski, Officer Janakis, Detective Janakis, next week we'll start Project Alert with LCAA. I know I had spoken to you about a transfer of funds at the end of the year in regards to covering the overtime for backfilling the shift. Anthony was able to find a grant that I applied for to hopefully cover those costs at this point in time. We'll find out next week through the MMA if we receive that $6,000 grant. Yesterday, I put in for a $10,000 grant to cover the two huge community policing events that we have. One is our Student Academy, and the other one will be the Citizens Police Academy that we're starting up next month. So one night a week, we'll have 3 or 4 hours here at the station, get a snapshot of exactly what the police department does and whatnot. I think that's pretty much it for in regards to our budget, but the capital expenses, I can just give you a brief rundown of those. We're going to stay in line with our cruiser so about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, Matt King put together a cruiser replacement. And basically what they do is every 2 to 3 years, every year we ask for 1 patrol car or 2 patrol cars or 2 cars, whatever it happens to be. This year happens to be an actual patrol vehicle to replace one of the higher mileage cars and one of the admin vehicles, which is close to 100,000 miles on yours now. Close to 100,000 miles on one of the admin cars. This has actually worked really well. We have some of the best cars in the area, and we pride ourselves on that with the best technology in that cruiser. So you'll see those 2 capital funds requests there. We have a radio maintenance capital fund. I believe the last couple of years it's been close to 12,000, right around there. This is going to actually jump to 19,521. The reason the jump this year is police and fire had our radios go down. When our radios went down, we found out there was what's called a MUX switch that was at one of the towers that went bad. That was not covered under our service agreement. It was a $2,000 bill that we weren't really planning on. And I questioned as to why we're paying Cybercon so much money if they're not going to cover this console and these systems. So Chief Wazinski and myself met with Cybercom, and we actually did an audit of our entire tower system, our console, our infrastructure, and lo and behold, there was a lot of things on there that weren't being covered that should have been covered. And I'm going to refer to Chief Wazinski real quick on this. We have 5 or 6 more MUX that can possibly go bad this year because they have a 10-year lifespan. So in doing that, we figured we would bump that up. So if these do go in this now 10-year lifespan, we'll be covered, and they're $2,000 a piece.
So is this the total cost, or is there some in your budget as well?
No.
So it's all here?
All here.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, I had also a question on, so when we're talking about replacement vehicles, I know all towns aren't created equal when it comes to replacing a vehicle. So what does it entail when you're saying it's not just a shell of the vehicle?
No, it's not.
Okay, so
3 or 4 years of life of a cruiser,
yeah.
Technology depletes. Everybody knows, a laptop today is not the same laptop we have as tomorrow. So what we can, for $2,500 this year, is going to be $5,000 next year.
Yeah.
So we can't just cut the wires and put the new laptop in the cruiser. It just doesn't work. The light system, the sirens, the interlocking devices for the rifles, the rifles themselves. We try to go on the same schedule. So everything for that car, first aid kits, refills, all gets replaced with that. We get all brand new going forward.
So of the 65,000, how much are the accoutrements, if you will?
I couldn't.
Is it half of it? Is it a third?
No, I bet you 1/3.
Okay, so,
1/3, yeah.
Okay. So it's 40/20, basically.
Yeah. And again, and I'll go back to what I said earlier. We sometimes only have 2 officers on the road. We need to have the best of the best when we respond to your house or to someone else's house in regards to a call. We need that. We need the best of the best to make sure that we get there, that we're not having breakdowns, the lights aren't going off, that our rifles are on perfect working order, that our tasers that are assigned to the cruisers are working. Sometimes there's an officer on scene by themselves before the second officer gets there. I'm not saying we can't have calls where there's 3 officers that show up or 4 officers, but on the midnight shift, 11 to 7, there's 2 officers on. So if one's across town, the other one's there. We need to make sure we have the best of the best. So. Not sure if that answered it.
Oh, it did.
You'll see that there's a bid for $7,500 for carpet replacement, and that is for this room here, the sergeant's room, and the detective's office. It is 10, 11 years old now, starting to see wear and tear. We'll talk about other wear and tear of the building in a bit, but that's what we have at this point in time. I didn't say that out.
Any other questions, Chief? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
He's a lot more modest than Wazinski's first year, I'll tell you that.
One thing I will note, though, is we are very fortunate to have a reserve officer who has a private company that does staffing analysis. We started putting it together already. There was one done in 2014 that was never presented, and we'll be working on it this year. So, modesty went out the window.
Request all the
I
budget
don't know
numbers.
if you guys looked at
Chase
the
said zero,
memo that
no
came out
change
from
in
the
total,
schools last
but
night.
if we're really gonna spend that money on subscription, we should show that and take it out of some other places so that
Recognize
reflects
the
what we're
SRO.
gonna do.
It's not funded
Any
in
one of those
their
extras of those?
1.5
You wanna take one? Here. Here you
$4
go.
million request.
Okay. Yeah,
But
good
it's
idea.
at least a line item in there, unfunded,
Okay.
but, okay, at least recognizes it.
So the school would pay that.
No.
It's my only contribution.
They got trees. Scott's putting you to work already.
You think you're spam?
No, it wasn't. What is spam? No, it's a kid.
How'd you like it?
Good morning.
Morning.
Wait a couple minutes for just dive in.
Keep rolling.
Okay. So the handout that you have is basically, it's the same information that you have from Bonnie, and I just added a little bit of color to it and a little separation. All right.
Like it.
A little easier to follow along, at least for myself. So as we go through the salary section, in the level staffing for 2020, the items in yellow, those are contractual obligations and the bylaw increases. That's basically the next step for payroll-wise. That's just good. That's going right down for each item for admin, for the overtime salaries, deputies, as well as myself, and as well as the union members.
Educational stipend is something new this year, or?
Nope, it's always been in there, and the difference between the 19 and the 20, it's been broken out. So it was actually, it was carried in the salaries as previously, and that was withdrawn and relocated down below, just for tracking purposes.
Yeah, one of the things we're doing with Munis is we have a better capability of breaking out the costs. So some of the things were previously carried in, the salary line items in like 3 or 4 different categories. So we're trying to break out educational stipends so that as we go forward in 2020, 2021, you'll have a better view of year-over-year increases.
Okay, so these numbers look like the training and education is going from 58.5 to 83.5. You got 70 plus 13.5. So where was that
It was up,
30,000?
it came out, it was in salaries.
Okay, so
spread out amongst all the salaries, or just, was it?
Correct. It was all included.
Firefighter's salary, or?
Yeah.
Part of the union's contract?
It was part of the union contract, right? It's all, it was included in that previously.
It still is.
Okay, so.
And it still is, but it's broken out here.
Okay, so
Not
that-
about that.
So it's,
It's not an
so
increase. We've always, it's something that we've paid previously.
So that's not showing up in the salaries now, as well as showing up in the 13th act.
I mean, it's arguable
That's where I'm
that,
confused.
Correct.
we oftentimes are arguing to see the full employee cost, and now we're going in the other direction of having to piece it together to get the full cost.
This lines up with Munis too, probably, right? We can break this out.
Yeah, Munis has once we get the payroll live, they have a really great way of looking at total compensation.
Yeah.
And that's something that you can push out into the open checkbook capacity too. So I was just showing somebody yesterday.
yeah, because what you don't see here is also is the
Yeah.
benefits.
Right, no,
So
this is
we'll
showing
see all that in Munis.
So,
everything, yes.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
It makes sense.
you'd have to do a sort of a subset to get all that.
Yeah.
So which of,
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind breaking it down,
which of
as
these
long as the total cost
compensation
is
versus
obvious
reimbursement?
somewhere.
Yeah.
In other words, what I'm particularly asking is about the training versus the educational stipend. The educational stipend, is that salary essentially that
Yes.
is due
degrees.
as the result of educational achievements
Right.
versus training is paying for them to go to training courses this year?
Correct.
Or on-site.
Or on-site?
Or on-site, yep.
Compensated for their time while they're in training.
That's correct, yep. We have fire training every first and third Monday of the month, and we have EMS training. One of the issues that we've had, that we've evolved into is going to the paramedic level, and by doing that, it increases the training that we need department-wise. So that is something that, now, there's additional training, there's additional requirements, and that brings everybody up to a new standard, a higher level of care, to, offer those services to the community. So, yes, that's where kind of all of that comes into play.
So the level staffing comes up to a 10% increase, is what the bottom line of all that is.
Correct. And going down through the expenses,
While we're here, the 62K in the mission budget that you want to add, what is that?
So, with further discussion with the deputy and myself in the last week, we've been reviewing a lot of the challenges that we've been experiencing. One of the things with the fire prevention position is the amount of time, training, and dedication, the continuity within the position. This is dealing with everyone's inspections, plan reviews for every construction project in town, smoke and CO inspections when homes are selling, refinancing, everything like that. That was for that position. So in the dedication of the position, we have decided to withdraw that. So we're going to hold off on the increase. The deputy has been working for the last year in education and everything like that to bring himself up to that standard, to keep the continuity within the position. So at this time, we'd like to hold off on that.
Expecting to come
Additionally,
up with a different plan later on, or?
well, the plan is, this year, we've gone through a lot of change. We've added personnel, we've created lieutenants. There's a lieutenant on every shift now. Some of those responsibilities have gone to the lieutenants, and we've tried to shift a little bit more responsibility their way as well. So we'd like another year. It only makes sense to have another year to evaluate the big picture. If we can deliver a little bit more responsibility to them, we're going to shoot for that. And the deputy will be continuing to follow that role. And it's really crucial to have that one person within that position to deal with all the contractors, the town, all the inspections. It's working rather well.
I appreciate, when you came to us looking for money for lieutenants, one of the things that you said is, listen, we're going to shift things around and the deputy's going to take on this responsibility. So I appreciate you having that realization and saying, we kind of bit this off and we're going to try to figure it out. And I like the justification for it, in that, you know, he's immersed himself in it, he's becoming more educated in it, and the continuity, I think, speaks volumes. So I personally appreciate you reevaluating that. It eliminates any questions I had for you.
How much of the salary is or is any of the paramedic salary here? Is it included here, paramedic salary?
It is included. It's
So
included in
we've got-
in salaries.
So how
and
much of
wages.
the increase is just the normalization? We hired them during the year, right?
They were hired last January, so they were funded last year for a half of
Half
the
the
year,
year.
and this year
This is a
they're
full-
blended in as a full year.
Okay.
So for this fiscal year, it's fully.
Right.
So that's contributing to the 10% increase.
So that should be in
Yep.
there. All right.
Do we have, where are we at numbers-wise with the ALS?
So we're, right now, we're in the process of putting together a presentation for both boards. We've had 6 months of revenue to come in. The first quarter was is a difficult time because we were still transitioning from our old billing service to the new billing service. And it is all, transitioned, and now November's numbers have actually come in, and that's the first full month of good, solid revenue from our new billing company. And we're actually meeting with them next week to, break out some of that detail to show everybody. So going forward, our hopes are is that we'll continue that trend. It's the highest revenue that we've brought in 1 month. We brought in $57,000 in 1 month just on medical revenues. It's about $10,000 more than any other month that we've ever brought in.
And I would imagine that you can probably do a look back with the new company and say, okay, these are the numbers that we had with the other company.
Yep.
We know what we have from you right now. Can they build a model and say, this is what it would have been had it been with us? Just to help you to
we
have
did.
a better forecasting tool.
Yep, when we talked about things back last March, that's what we did with this new company, just a forecast. And when we looked into those revenues, we tried to stay very conservative as we painted the picture. And right now, we're averaging the last year's worth of numbers at about $45,000 a month.
Okay.
So that's realistic average from the billing company to forecast. And as we hopefully exceed those revenues, that will paint the picture as we go forward.
Based on
The last line here says revolving ambulance account anticipates a $650,000 budget offset. So you're anticipating about a $52,000 a month run rate, and that sort of feels okay, or it doesn't feel?
Yep.
We just went through the numbers this week with the admin there and the chief, and we had planned for $650,000 borrow. This fiscal year, we did about a $580,000 borrow.
Right.
Based on the numbers that we have, we can support the $650,000. It's going to be a drawdown, but we have a reserve built into that ambulance fund. We were looking to use the reserves to transition. So we can support the $650,000. We're not going to bring $650,000 in revenue yet, but it looks like in the following fiscal year, we may be able to meet that target to sustain the $650,000.
Well, if the run rate is in the $50,000 range, whether it's 57 or 48 or whatever, it sounds like you're at least within shooting distance of that number.
That's correct.
Is the point.
Yep.
And that's obviously the goal, is to get there.
Right. One of the other things that you need to, I guess, keep in the back of your mind is within that 650 also includes that offset for those 2 dispatchers for the enhanced 911 system. Right?
Okay, well, but that was part of the picture, right? So that's what we should measure against, is the business plan was put together, how are we doing against the business plan? And in your presentation of the selectmen, and when you come back to us, I think that's a reasonable thing to look at, even in a graphic form,
Yeah.
right? Just to keep track how we're doing. Okay.
And how does that revenue compare to historic revenues pre-ALS? So are we talking about the $650,000 offset Is it completely new 650? I don't think so,
Total,
right? So
right, so it's about doubled, roughly doubled from what we were bringing in as BLS.
We used to program at 300,000.
So, Chief, I think in previous discussions, you had talked about not collecting 100% of the billings. How's that working out now?
So we're actually, when we're meeting with the billing company this week, they're going to give us our percentage of, our collections percentage.
Okay.
So we're, in doing all of our research with Coastal, they were at a roughly 97-98% collection rate.
Okay.
So as we transition, we're going to be able to have those solid numbers, as we trend forward.
Okay.
So we're looking forward to seeing
The
that.
same way that we would look at how you're doing against your plan, I would expect you to ask them, how are they doing against
Yeah.
that benchmark?
And I think as seen with our first months of solid revenue on our deposits in November, that's showing true. So we're encouraged with that. Second page on capital. So the first couple of items are items that have been in our capital each year. Major repairs, $25,000. That covers the expenses of all of our vehicles when they go down. Repairs for the ladder, the ambulances, all of the apparatus. The protective clothing, the $15,000. That's, we're in a constant rotation with the members' gear that's in there. That gives us a primary set of gear as well as a replacement set of gear, so that, after fires or major incidents, the gear is constantly being washed and kept clean to keep, carcinogens, everything like that away from everyone's body. We also have a backup set. One of the things that has been in the capital plan is the replacement of the ambulance. Back a few years ago, we transitioned from the old van style to the new truck style. So we were actually able to gain a little bit of additional time with that because it was a heavier duty truck, and it lasted a bit longer. So our goal would be to go ahead and replace the ambulance. And then with our, there's some thought that it may make sense for us to keep the old ambulance so that we could have three. Very commonly, we have, I misspoke last night to Chuck, but it's 11% of our call volume is back-to-back. We had over 200 calls that were back-to-back calls, meaning, all right, we're out on a medical, within the next 5 minutes, we have another medical, and on many other occasions, there's even a third, where we still bring in mutual aid to do that, because we don't have the personnel nor the vehicles to transport that many people. With the trends and the increasing run volume, it may make sense to keep that ambulance kind of as a reserve, so that when things do happen or they break down, we'll always have a backup there to run it. Since we already own it, and as things trend and the medicals increase, we have the medical facility up here at the Point. That's increased run volume for us, as well as the nursing home, and just in general, townwide. Our medical responses are increasing, more so than fire, and they always have. We're about 65% medical, and that's trending upward.
When we talked before, we said that the Point has the Emerson activity. You seeing much in the way of activity out of that, or?
It's pretty regular. We're up there a couple times a week, at least.
4 or 5 times a week.
Yeah.
What are you doing up there?
So Emerson, the urgent care facility, patients will come in there and they'll realize that it's something that they
gotta go
shouldn't
to
be
a
there
hospital.
for. They need to be transferred to, for cardiac care, or it's something, more significant than what they can handle. So we transport out of there.
I'm glad he wasn't.
So this third vehicle, just to make sure, so this isn't a vehicle that you're going, it will be strictly for backup. It's not going to be part of your typical call. It would never be first or second vehicle out.
This new vehicle would be a primary.
No, I mean the third, the one that you're just kind of holding, your old vehicle, you're holding.
Yep.
on
Power
to.
medical too.
We're not, because I mean, you do mention maintenance costs on an older vehicle, so, but it won't be part of a going out all-
Wouldn't be part of the rotation.
Right.
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 The first two vehicles, we try to rotate them every other day. So
Yeah.
two groups run one, the other two groups run the other ambulance to try to keep them on a regular rotation so that, one of them isn't being worn down any
Yeah.
quicker than the other. And by doing that, it's also going to allow us to kind of lengthen our time in between replacements. If we get onto that every, 6-year replacement, by the time we get there, we'll have an ambulance that's going to be, a little bit older. And obviously, that's going to depend on the run volume and, things that happen within the town. The busier we get, the more they run, the vehicles get tired. But that would be the goal, is to basically extend the life of them. And by keeping a third, we'd always have one in backup, so that as they do get older, we do incur maintenance issues and things of that nature, we'll always have something right there to have a backup.
Chief, is the desire to, I'll say replace, but move medical to, is that driven principally by the carrying cost for the maintenance, or the fact that when it needs maintenance, it's down and unavailable? What's the real motivation?
All of the above. For example, this past week, we had, one of our ambulances was down, a compressor went down, we lost our suspension. In the process of waiting for that to be repaired, the brakes went on our other ambulance. So unfortunately, we had a day where we didn't have an ambulance available. We were lucky enough to get it repaired, rather quickly, but that happens every now and then, and to have that other ambulance, when one ambulance is down, say, for a week or a week and a half, which is the one with the compressor issue, we're relying on one ambulance. Now we would be able to have two. That'd always be the backup. There, could be that stray occasion where both of the ambulances are tied up at the hospital and that third medical comes in. If we have the staffing that came back for that, we'd be able to staff that as well, instead of relying on mutual aid.
Chief, and this new vehicle has the most updated equipment. I mean, it's being updated probably constantly every couple of years.
That's correct.
So it has the
And
newest.
Some of the requirements change by OEMS.
Yeah.
And within this ambulance, it would be set up for ALS. OEMS has new requirements that come out that are, updated every year, and that would be included in this. Similar to the cruisers, like Chief Bernard said, it's not just the vehicle, it's the components that go into it and the things that are required by the state to outfit that vehicle for its use.
Okay.
The accoutrement.
And how long can the third vehicle remain in service before the equipment is so obsolete that it needs to be taken out of service?
If we, basically on those rotations, we're probably looking at, I'd say 10 to 15 years.
Okay, so a meaningful amount of time.
As a third,
Yeah.
that's a backup vehicle, right. We're looking to basically extend that. It doesn't have to be in the best, condition, but it has to.
Right, I want to make sure it's good
everything.
enough, but I also want to know, like, we're only going to get a year out of extending it.
Or we have to pay $20,000 to update
To bring it up, right.
Right.
I want to know, with the equipment that it's got today, how long could we continue to string it along?
I think with these newer vehicles, with the truck chassis compared to the older van style, they're heavier duty. We're gonna figure that out, exactly how long. I can't nail down a
Understand,
solid
I'm not trying to
time
tie you
frame.
to a
Yeah.
specific number.
And if it breaks down, we'll have the new ladder truck follow.
Can we just get a ladder on the new ambulance and save a ton of money on the ladder truck? I had to talk.
You can get Chris started, stop putting
Anthony.
salt on the roads, these things would last 33.
That's
We can start it,
We
we
can
can
go back to sand.
We'll call out starter.
No,
Meet a guy outside there. He talks to his dad's house, and he'd be a plumber and a chimney
No, you go
guy,
ahead.
or
Last
whatever
question.
that is.
Chief, I got a question for you.
Yep.
So if we're looking at adding this other ambulance, you've got the major repair at $25,000 a year. First of all, how have you historically performed with that $25,000? Have you used it all? Have you used most of it?
Depends on the year. Last year, we used the majority of it. We had repairs to the ladder, we had a couple repairs to some of the engines. And then some years, we're able to carry roughly 8 to 10,000. And unfortunately, the following year, if we have a good year, the following year pays for it. Something significant has happened, and we've used it up. So having that ability to carry a little bit and having that little built-in buffer has really helped.
So then my follow-up question is does that appropriation need to be increased? Because now you're carrying another vehicle that's older that may need more repairs.
So
Or
here's.
decreased because you
Or
have a new ladder truck.
decreased.
Well, so this number was increased, this number was increased last year, specifically for issues that we've had with the ladder. Now having a newer vehicle coming, where the hopes are that obviously those issues would decrease on that, but if we keep a third ambulance, as some of the rest of the fleet comes with issues, we recommend staying with that number. And again, that kind of builds in our buffer. That's something that we'd be able to review if we, carry it for a year or two and it grows, increases to an amount that's inappropriate, then we could always go back and look at that and reduce it.
So, just to throw out here too, because I know we had some discussion on it, are the fleets between yours and the police department getting big enough that we should have some in-house mechanical expertise rather than going outside all the time?
Excellent point and topic. An additional, I know we've had some discussion over the last year, an additional in-house mechanic would be huge. I think there would be some significant savings between fire and police at having an
They're
in-house
shaking their heads
mechanic.
back there, so we need to have some other discussions.
Well, on the fire side, I think it would be significant. Some of the issues that we've run into is just the ability to get under the vehicles and see what the road salts and things like that are doing to our vehicles, change things, greasing them, regular maintenance. All of that stuff to be done in-house would definitely or have the potential of being a saving.
Do most of the things you have to get done, but you both, and I don't want to go too far down, so I'm just curious, you can go to a regular mechanic, or do you have to go to somebody who knows those vehicles and all the electronics and special stuff that's in there?
For fire and ambulances, a truck mechanic, diesel mechanic.
Okay.
Heavier
Betsy, we
equipment.
have talked with the departments about doing something out of the DPW and having,
Right.
because right now you have people just going to local mechanic shops, and we really should evaluate what we're spending versus if we did put maybe a part-time or maybe another full-time, it depends, and have all of our fleet serviced over at the DPW in Ada Bay. So this way we can control it, we can control the maintenance, we can make sure the fleets are always in top of the line. There would be a fleet maintenance program that tells you when you need an oil change. It can be really beneficial.
Be more a little
I would-
proactive, right.
I would include light and water in that as well. I mean, they've got vehicles as well in terms of, whether the town funds it, whether light and water helps fund it, whatever, but they've got trucks.
Yeah, as we
And,
start discussions, I'll definitely talk to Nick and see what they're doing and if they're interested in.
At least bridge it. I mean, they've got vehicles just like we do, so if we can spread the cost across more vehicles, it might make more sense to do.
Just, $350,000 a lot, it's a big number. So without that, you're about 60 grand in capital requests.
Yep.
So that 350 is for a like ambulance, a one-for-one.
Correct.
Updated, like ambulance, the tandem style, the truck style.
Yes.
With the advent of some of the transit-style ambulances, they're different than the van, the F-350 Econo lines. have you looked at those at all? And I know they've gotten very good reviews. They're really good in the city for maneuverability. Where are we at? Have we done any of that research just to see? 'Cause
They're great transfer
I think the price
vehicles.
tag is a lot, the
Yep.
price tag's a lot lower than that.
It's a great transfer vehicle for a private ambulance company, for the amount of equipment that we're required to carry, and the staffing to actually work on the patients in more critical levels. Those vehicles don't offer that.
The compartment space is the biggest issue. Like, we carry, the medics carry fire gear, air packs, coats. You don't have the storage space in there, because I'm with you, they're a lot less money, they're maneuverable, but that's what you get into. So a private ambulance, what those guys are wearing is what they wear. They don't need the compartment space, so they get a van. When you look at ours, they're carrying 2 full sets of fire gear, 2 air packs, because it's required by OEMS, and you can't get that kind of compartment space on a straight walled van. You gotta buy the box, because I would love to, I think they'd be less maintenance.
I think so as well.
But you
So
just,
those are all
that's.
the questions that are behind
We've
my
been
question.
looking at all those, because we have medics that have worked in private ambulance, and that's the biggest issue. You just don't have the compartment space to carry all the gear.
Thank you.
Yeah. I got my real estate tax bill last week. That's why the fire prevention thing went away. Just saying.
You think I'm being-
Exactly. It's Bill Colbert.
As we go down the line, the hose replacement, $15,000. On the capital grid, we have that as a 3-year replacement. Much of the hose that is on the apparatus is currently from the late 90s or early 2003. And that needs to be replaced. What we found when it does go into service and is used, some of the hose lines are sprinkler-like. They're just, they're getting old, brittle, cracking. We are doing our annual testing. This last summer, we lost 16 lengths during annual testing. So it makes sense to bring this all up to date and reliability as well. And then finally, the $5,000 for the utility trailer. This would get us a utility trailer for the new all-terrain vehicle to take out into the woods and stuff.
Is it a closed one, or is it?
No, it's just an open trailer, and that way, we'd be able to transport it anywhere in town. It's registered, it's roadworthy, but over the 20 miles an hour, it just takes a bit of time to get across town and to get anywhere else. That vehicle was purchased through grant money this past year through some state funds, so we've been rather lucky with that, and we were able to offset it with a little bit of gift money.
What size is the trailer?
I believe it's a 8x16.
Got one you want to donate?
What do we currently use?
We don't have one.
You do have a trailer though, right?
No, we don't. We use personal equipment.
So with the new speed limit, do you really need a trailer?
Put some lights on that thing and put a siren
So
on
right
it.
now, we're using, we use the deputy's trailer
Oh, we don't
or
wanna-
personal equipment, or if highway's open, we could, potentially use something
Oh, is that
like
why I say
that.
ripping around Newtown Road?
Yeah.
Chief, do you know if there's any grants that might be available for any of this equipment listed here?
Not offhand. What I can say, one of the things that was removed from the capital list this year was the replacement of the air packs. And thanks to Anthony and some deputy, some creative writing, we were able to receive the housing choice grant, correct? And
And that was enough to cover what you need.
$250,000, yep, that replaces all of our air packs. So nice to be able to have that grant and remove something off of the capital request list.
We would include that in your budget, your sales budget.
You just did.
All right.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chief. John?
Just one last thing I might as well mention. I was going to mention at the selectmen's meeting, but maybe the chief can tell us. We received an email from a private citizen. There was an incident in Princeton on New Year's Day, chief, and it was a medical situation, and the chief happened to be there with a firefighter from Concord, or lieutenant from Concord.
Yeah, one of the we were in Princeton, right by my buddy's house there, and it was actually out in the woods behind his house. 17-year-old kid, they were playing around by the cliffs, and he fell 30 feet down the
I
cliff.
saw that on the news.
And he was pretty seriously hurt, and we were actually there to help them, to assist the pararescue crew to do some rappelling down the cliff and do a removal, and help to get him up to get some medical care.
The person that sent the letter just couldn't say enough about Chief Wazinski and his help in the situation, so I think it's great. It should be noted.
Thanks, Chief.
He's all right.
Thank you, sir.
Good
He's all
job.
right.
Did we bill them for that?
Is that mutual aid?
High-rate ALS.
You're donating the ambulance.
You're eliminating.
I mean, I think we should just send a bill and see what happens. It sneaks through the payment system.
What was the number of the differential for the fire? There was nothing, right?
It's, you're not asking for any, their staffing increase.
Right.
Warren.
That's fine.
The only thing, I took the liberty of putting in a small increase for John's stipends that he receives for covering the veteran services. It was
You okay with that?
$7,500 this year. So we added the 4.5% that's typical for the other staff members.
You okay with that, John?
Yes. Thank you.
I was going to say, it hasn't gone up since I left the job.
What? It has.
So we can reduce the $10,000?
Big notice.
Just walk us through what you got, John?
I think everything else is the same.
Everything else should be the basic stuff.
All right, thanks.
I don't know what you...
Thanks for your time.
Now, it's a real nit, but the $10,000
Yes.
for the building
Yeah.
was not budgeted last year. I know we found money for it, but it was not budgeted, so it really is an increase.
It's budgeted this year.
That was the intention last year, that we would budget it the following.
I'm sorry? No, it wasn't budgeted.
That was the intention last year, was that we would
Well, the reason that
find the money for it last year.
Yeah,
and
and
budget for it.
I don't have a problem with that, but just from an accounting standpoint,
Yep,
I just
yep.
think it's...
The reason it's
an increase.
here in the 2019 budget is because it was put in the budget article at the special town meeting. So it sits in the town's operating
Right.
budget at
Yeah,
this.
after the annual budget. Okay. And I know we had to get a little bit creative as to how that agreement was put together. It's basically a lease agreement.
Correct.
Is my understanding. So is the town actually using the space? I have plans to use the space?
The town is more than welcome to use the space whenever they need to. That's part of the whole agreement.
Okay.
Basic agreement is to make it sure that it's available for the Legion to meet there.
Okay.
They have a meeting space because they don't have one now.
Probably either Anthony or Cindy could speak to
Yeah.
this. It's new enough that I think that we're in the process of letting people know
Right.
that the space is available.
Correct, that's my
Right.
point.
Sports departments,
If it's
etc.
available.
Yeah.
then
Right, so I had
people should know
discussions
about it.
with John and Hal about utilizing the space during the day.
Yep.
Because it sits empty. The VFW doesn't open until 3. So we had some discussions with Anthony as well, just trying to see what usage we could, how we could utilize that space during the
Okay.
day.
Good.
And kind of alleviate some of the use of the multipurpose room or other departments. So we're working on that. We're having those discussions.
A lot of department meetings that start at 2 and end at 3 conspicuously enough.
Productivity goes up.
You have an Irish coffee break.
I'd also
So
just
this-
mention on the benefits, we increased this a number of years ago to make sure that it's actually keeping pace with the actual expenditures. And as of December, it's about a 40% run rate, so
So it's about
pretty
on
good.
track.
We're pretty good, yeah. It's been
running, I think, between $10,000 and $12,000 a month right now for the benefits. All depends on medical bills and other bills.
Right. Now, you saw a bit of a step up with the 40B up on.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, definitely.
Up on 2 right there.
Yes.
Any other, I mean, are you seeing an increase sort of in general, or are things sort of stabilizing? Or?
I've seen an increase in younger veterans, more so than the older population.
Oh, we're all dying off. So.
Yes, I know. That has happened. We know that. This dying off or they moved out of town, one or the other, because they can't afford to be here. That's another problem. Anyhow, yeah, I have seen an increase in that respect. But because of other things, other ones that have been on it are slightly off of it. They don't get a monthly thing, but they're still eligible for other benefits if they need it. So I've got that factor in there too.
But the 185 still feels about okay.
Yes.
We end up getting a good portion of that back from the state, right, also?
Oh, yeah.
We get 2/3 or something like that?
75%.
And that just goes into the general fund and then
It's a cherry sheet
goes
revenue.
back to fund this the next year, so.
So it's not tied, help me understand that then, so it's not actually tied to this line item, it just comes back to the general fund?
Right.
Okay.
You spend it, then you apply to get the money, and then it comes back, and it goes into the general fund, and then you fund it again. So it's almost like free cash, which is a year and over years, that just keeps sort of coming.
And it's one of those accounts that if you don't fund it, the state will charge you for it anyway. So you really, it's just better to be proactive and fund it.
Good. Okay. And your new digs down on the...
They're working out pretty good. It's pretty
down in the library there.
Yeah, it's working out good.
Good.
They've got it in the
More
fiction.
room.
He's in the fiction section.
You know what?
I'm sorry?
So you're in the fiction.
The storage section. They store all their old books in there, in that room, that they have extra ones on.
Yeah, good. Okay, any other questions for John? It's certainly a worthwhile service you provide to the town. Thank you for it.
Well, I thank you for your support of everything that we do. Veterans deserve a lot.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thanks, John. Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming out today. This fine morning.
Good morning.
Did we wake you up this morning?
Yeah, it's early for me.
Is it snowing up where you live?
Got about a foot this morning.
It's getting deep.
Yeah.
So you just took the ATV from the fire department?
Speed limit through Groton has always been 20.
Yeah, I got your back.
So, as you can see, our budget has increased this year, mostly due to that we added a 19-hour staff person. So, the majority of the increase is in salary. All our other expenses have pretty much stayed the same. We've shifted some dollars from different line items, but they've pretty much equaled the same. I think there's a $300 difference increase total in all the line item expenses. We're anticipating about $270,000 of revenue coming in from Comcast, Verizon, and through our intermunicipal agreement with Boxborough. This probably will be the first year that we'll have to supplement some of our, when you add in benefits, the fringe benefits to the employee line, the salary line rather, it comes out just a little bit over $270,000.
So there'll be about $600 that we'll have to take out of our war chest, which is about,
That may be, it may not be.
right.
The 270 that we're expecting for revenue is based on last year, so it could be 280. It could be something less.
Right.
But we don't know, but you're right, we're bouncing up against
Right.
revenues matching up with expenses, which we've never had that before. Usually we can put away $30,000 or $40,000.
And we have about a half,
People cutting cable, is that, how come that revenue comes down, or?
no, the revenues have been going up. And mostly it's because I think the cable prices go up. So with every cord cut, the increase of, offsets that, so. We haven't been hurt in that department. We made that presentation before the selectmen regarding some rule changes that the FCC has proposed. So we're waiting on that. We haven't heard, the FCC is still weighing in on all the things that have been submitted regarding that. But just briefly, they could, the cable companies could begin to charge us for what they call in-kind benefits, which are the cable drops that they've provided for free in different municipal buildings over the years. They could put a price tag on that, and they would deduct that from the monies that they give us. The other thing that they could start to do would be to charge us for broadcasting on our 3 PEG channels, public, education, government. They could put a price tag on what they think. Right now it's free. And they could say, well, we charge Channel 7 to carry their signal, we charge them $100,000, say. We're going to figure out.
Charge you $5,000 or something?
Yeah,
$10,000
something.
Or something, yeah.
Right.
Prorated.
So we're looking at how that might affect us if they do that. Some other things we're just floating around right now, just in the beginning stages of exploring, is if what happens if we stop broadcasting on our Comcast channels and Verizon channels and just go to streaming. Because a lot of people are getting their information that way these days, and so that could be an option. We don't know. We're not there yet. Most likely, because of all the opposition to the FCC's ruling, that this could be tied up in courts for a couple of years. So we're probably looking a couple of years down the road before we have to really address those issues.
But if you went just to streaming, you lose the Comcast and Verizon revenue, right?
No, they still have to pay us.
How?
You can see why they're grumpy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's part of the agreement with the community that
Part
so
of the
much.
franchise agreement with the town,
Right.
5% of their gross revenues.
Okay.
So if they...
So what they're trying to do is lessen that 5%.
Yeah.
That's the
Now,
game they're
whether they would
Gotta
try
get
to charge
Netflix to
us
start paying a franchise.
for these channels, I don't know. It would not be absorbent. You're probably right. It would be somewhere in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, which we could live with.
Okay.
Just don't make it high def, please.
Get funded by them and then cut them down, that'd go.
I mean, I can't imagine it would be too much money because we're not in the HD realm for their channels.
Right.
They don't spend a lot on maintaining our channels. It's pretty much a modulator and some, a couple of little things at their head end. But if you've watched the quality of the channels, sometimes, it's not up to par. They're supposed to be as equal to the broadcast stations, but sometimes I think that we get the short end of the stick in that category.
Just to
so-
slow things down a little bit, yeah.
Could just be us, too.
Obviously, you cover your own capital for the most part. And
Right.
You've got,
Yeah, everything is outside of the town budget. It's all funded through those funds.
is there anything major in the capital that we're talking about, or is it mostly just maintenance?
Actually, this year, we didn't have any real capital items because of the uncertainty of the future of things. We wanted to make sure we kept our war chest as it is right now, just till we get a handle on
Okay.
what the FCC is going to
So
do.
we just are not planning to do anything right now in capital areas.
We do still have capital monies set aside from previous town meetings
Right.
for upgrading room 103 to HD cameras, so there you go, Gary.
Oh, no.
All Gary's meetings are going
But that comes with a slimming lens and everything, so everything.
And a makeup artist.
Yeah, it's all included.
Right, okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was last year or this year, there was money for updating the school, one of the rooms at the high school, was it? A studio or something?
Maybe in the broadcast from?
We don't broadcast or do anything
Okay.
I think it
in
was
the
at,
schools.
it was at the building, right? Wasn't it at the town hall?
I don't think
Okay,
that's not correct.
That was in the school budget, but it wasn't out of our budget.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The only thing, we do
Yeah.
provide a class
Right.
to the school. but
Yeah, I see the
that's-
kids up at
At
the
the studio.
studio. Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
We have one star student in particular, I think Tom might be familiar with, who's Dr. Caroline.
Great.
So it's,
That's right.
Mark, if you had a magic wand and you could have the ability to broadcast from one or some of the schools, would you start at the high school because we have the auditorium and be able to broadcast events from there?
Well, we already have the magic wand. In fact, when they had the meeting recently at the auditorium at the high school, we went live with that through streaming.
Right.
We streamed it back, so you got it.
Okay, so you can stream back to the studio and then it goes across the town?
Basically, if you have an internet connection anywhere, we can go live from anywhere with the equipment we have.
So any of the sporting events?
Yeah,
In all likelihood, you wouldn't because you don't want to cut into the revenues.
That's right.
People stay home,
Correct.
comfort of the seat. That's
That-
why I don't go to a lot of sporting events.
That is correct. We would love to do live sporting events, but that is exactly the reason, because the ones that we cover, the mainstream ones, football, basketball, things like that, that charge admission, we didn't want to hurt the gate.
Oh, go ahead and hurt the gate.
There's a blackout.
Just like town meeting, we're going to town meeting live because we don't want to hurt the gate. As far as people come, you know. People might say.
Wow. Great. Anything else?
That's it.
All right.
Set up online.
Thank you for coming out so early.
Interactive TV, we'll do town meeting live. That way Jerry can stay home and yell at us.
Phone in.
Phone it in,
Like a
Jerry.
radio show.
Okay, Alicia? And friends?
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Good morning, Connie.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy, more
Killed another
papers.
tree.
Yay.
So it's,
Yeah, but it's in color, so that's okay.
how many different things are there on the tree?
So they're set opposite and opposed.
So that's, just go like that.
Like that.
Thank you.
So you basically have two each.
Nice picture.
Wow, look at this.
No room for crew at the end, huh?
What's that?
No room for
Vastly
crew at the end?
underdressed. Who's drone?
It's
my drone.
could have made the water more tropical looking.
Should have Photoshop?
We'll Photoshop it and make it more turquoise.
Trying to do
next
better.
time. Yeah.
Right.
So, thank you, everybody, for coming in on this crazy Saturday that you all do. It's much appreciated.
We were hoping for snow, but we didn't get any this year.
No, just some rain, just some rain. There was, 2 years ago, it was like craziness. So, we will, we'll try to keep this relatively short to get you guys back on track here. So, some of the major points for this past fiscal year, so we're currently at full operating with 6 full-time staff. In September, we increased our team program lead to 35 hours a week, full-time Schedule A position, instead of a part-time, non-benefited position. So over this last year, I've had the opportunity to kind of go in and do a deep dive of some of our indirect costs that the department incurs every year. And some of these expenditures are specifically, they're not linked to any programs that we have, but we still do need to pay them out. So a lot of the things that we fixed that we could bring into the programs, we did do that this past year. But we're also trying to maintain our mission statement, which is to keep prices at, a reasonable price for the community. So just some of the things that were a large amount were the staff benefits. So they were just over $100,000 for this year. And then the retirement as well from the previous recreation director, and that includes the health care for that. Our credit card fees that we actually absorbed, we don't charge the registrants for that, was just over $17,500. So that's something that, the Park Commission is talking about what we want to do with those, because it's a large fee that we're absorbing.
Alicia, are you baking that into the cost of
The programs, we haven't, we've just been
You're just
absorbing it.
absorbing it?
Yeah. So we're trying to come up with a plan to do that, because typically you don't see that in many places where they charge that extra fee. So, and because our program prices have kind of gone up and up over the years, just because staffing increases and things like that, we're trying, again, to keep those prices down to stay relevant with the towns surrounding us. So that was just one more added cost that we were trying to be able to, keep from the residents from having to pay that. So we're trying to get creative and figure out how we're going to, come up with a solution for that. So another thing that's happening, again, I just mentioned the increase for the summer seasonal wages. So the state is looking at turning the $15 minimum wage up within the next couple of years. So we're trying to be proactive in that, which also helps, our employees that work in the summer times, which are a lot of our teens. They're trying to save up for college. So we are going to ask at this Springtown meeting to proactively change our step and grade system for that Schedule C. And that would get us to our grade 3 jobs, which essentially would be lifeguards, starting at $15 an hour. So we're trying to be progressive in, making sure that we're ahead of the game when it comes to implementing that increase. And those are enrolled in the fees that we do have for this upcoming summer. So.
Along with being proactive with that, just so everybody knows, the state itself, the DCR, has gone to $15 for lifeguards. And with the severe shortage of lifeguards that we're seeing across the country, it really behooves us to go there so that we're not fighting to keep the beach open in the summertime.
Yep. All right, so you want to do your beach info? Yeah.
So just a quick rundown on the beach. Did you have
Mike down there.
Sorry. Just a quick rundown, just to let you guys know where we are at the beach. We've really had 2 operating years where we have financial information on the beach that came through our recreation software. So the past 2 years, we've seen an increase from $71,000 net revenue to $104,000 this past summer. We're looking to continue that gain. So 2019-2020 projections, we're looking at $110,000. One of the things that we've done is we've changed our parking and annual beach pass rates. So you saw a resident beach pass purchase go from $7,900 to a little over $14,000. Non-resident beach passes went from $13,000 to a little over almost $19,000 in purchases. So that's really helping us close the gap, and it's covering about just under 50% of the operating cost for staff wages now. So where we were operating in the red before, we're now operating in the black at the beach. So that's been a huge gain for us to be able to stabilize that beach pass. One of the things that was asked of us, is it feasible for us to make it a resident-only beach under the current calculations and our current rate of growth? That's not right now. So that would be a discussion for future funding. If that's where we want to go, that's going to need to be monies that we find elsewhere if we wanted to go down that route. For now, we're looking at projections of $16,000 coming in for residents and $20,000 for non-residents with the new rates that we're going to put into effect for the coming year. Which resident rate, we had a $5 increase, and we also put into effect some of the requests as far as an individual rate, a couple's rate, and then we adjusted the senior rate slightly as well. So we took some of the feedback that we got from last year and implemented that for the 2019-2020 season.
There will be an impact on the parking/day passes because the parking is incorporated into that pass. That's how you justified some of the increase, is that correct?
Correct, yeah, so we did that last year too. The reason that you see such a dramatic decrease in that is what we're seeing is we did see an increase last year in our parking because I believe Nara Park going up so high forced some of the non-residents to come to us, so we saw an increase in day passes. But what we're hoping is that people see the value in the annual pass and go to that route rather than that daily pass, and that way we can kind of control what we have a little more.
A question for you. What's the rationale behind looking at just making it residents only?
That was one of the requests. We got that request from the residents. That was strictly nothing more than, can we get some information, can we get some dialogue on, is this something that's feasible to pay for and operate the beach as a resident-only beach? So just in due diligence.
Harvard does it. I know it's a couple towns.
Yeah. Of which the towns who do as not as a resident-only beach, they fund a substantial part of what they're doing over there. They also have numerous beaches that aren't guarded. Westford is one of those towns, for instance, which they're trying to get lifeguards this year and next year just because of liability reasons. Programming, we went from $31,000 to $40,000, so a $9,000 increase. A large part of that was our affiliation with U.S. Sailing and the change in our sailing program. We increased our numbers. We almost doubled the amount of kids we were able to accept every week. And we had a wait list 7 out of our 8 weeks last year. So we're going to continue to grow that program. We're going to add a racing level this year, intro to sailboat racing, and hopefully have a regatta, a more official regatta at the end of this summer. Next year, we're going to try to partner with either the schools or Acton Boxborough, whomever wants, and we're actually going to get a community sailing team and a club sailing team for the schools in the area. So that's where we're going as far as our program projections. Snack Shack, you can only sell so much ice cream and things. We did see a pretty significant jump as far as our sales at the Snack Shack. I think that was just better management of our POS system. We actually had one in place that we were able to do inventories and things of that nature. The lifeguards, we got them water this year rather than let them grab water out of the Snack Shack as in previous years. So there was an increase there. The other thing we're going to start doing is partnering with companies like Phoenix Rising Pizza and some of the other ones you saw at Third Thursday are going to be coming Fridays and Saturday nights, and they're going to be hopefully donating back a part of their proceeds. We're also going to keep the beaches open later on those nights when we see our bigger things, so families can come down and have dinner, a little more interaction at the beach. All right.
Well, thank you. So 2 other points for fiscal year 19. The need for programming, as Tim had mentioned, for sailing, but overall, in general, has actually increased this last year. And the amount of space to house those programs is shrinking. So I know that we've talked about this before. I've done a presentation, so I'm not going to beat that drum again. But, that expanse of needed program and the limited amount of space for us to be able to run those programs does affect, how we operate because, we are a revenue-based customer service program for our department. So one of the things that we have just done recently, which we will invite you all out to come and take a look at, is we renovated room 123. So Tim did an amazing job. He did a lot of the work himself. So it's pretty phenomenal. So we've set it up so that instead of it just being kind of, it used to look very much like just a preschool room. So now we've changed that room to have, the solid floor, so we could do a small fitness class if we needed to in there. We plan on having, teen programs in there. We've got a sink and plumbing now. So if we want to do some art programs, we can do that as well. So it really is more dynamic to help us out and give us that one extra space.
Which room is 123? as you
So
come into the
where our
office?
office is,
Yeah.
directly across the hall, where the men's restroom is.
Okay.
So when we do, I'm trying to think, the most times that we use it in the past had been in the summertime for our teen recreation adventure crew. That was their base. And
So
then.
you come in the door, it's immediate right?
Yeah, so, yeah, when you walk through the doors, yep, it's gonna be on your immediate right. So, we're gonna do an open house on the 12th.
Yep, next
right?
Saturday, it's another Saturday for you guys, but if you want to stop by, we're doing pizza, soda, things, come in, check out the room. It's an open house for the whole community, come see it.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So the work in progress the other day.
Yes, you saw it, that's it, yep. So we are officially finished with it right now. I think we're just waiting on some legs for a couch, but that's about it. So it's pretty amazing, like it's a really great transformation, it's fantastic. And then lastly is we're going through a transitional period with the field maintenance process. And this has been last year, kind of going into this year. So that's just something I wanted to be able to talk with both boards about, and we kind of have had those discussions a little bit. So we're estimating that we'll only be able to collect around 24,000 from the youth sports organizations moving forward. So this is just kind of my opportunity to ask that with the highway department, we fund the request for the park staff as well as their field maintenance funding. And then we're also going to be starting a sports council to keep the lines of communication open for all the field users. So the Parks Commission's in the process right now of developing what that charter is going to look like and what those policies will be. We're going to base it off of the Wellesley community. They have a really amazing program. So that's something that, those individuals can, stay on top of it, ensure that we're maintaining the fields to the way that they should be, because the highway staff has done an amazing job to fix the fields in the last couple of years and get them back to a stable, playing surface, and we really want to keep them that way. So, Mike, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about the field stuff?
No, I think put it well. I trust everyone got my email just indicating what the commission's looking for. The big thing we need is just, it would be good if we could have a consistent, assuming we're going to get some money. I don't know if I should make that assumption. I probably shouldn't, but we need, if we do get some, we need it to be consistent in order to help the youth organizations be able to build their, or set their registration rates appropriately. For them to be able to forecast, we need to be able to tell them in some capacity what we're going to be charging them. So the commission feels comfortable if we can collect $24,000 from the youth sports. We feel comfortable with that rate. Like I said in my letter, we've lost a ton of customers because of alumni, which is a good, it's a great thing. We see it in our fields. But lacrosse is, 75% of our lacrosse users are now on turf, so we can't continue to charge them the same rate that we were charging them, and the same with football. So that's it's kind of where we are now. Alumni is a great thing, but we have this slight issue now where, we need to figure out where the rest of the money is going to come from. We still have the same amount of fields. We lost one field, so we still have, to maintain those fields. So that's kind of where we're at.
Well, it seems to me, where are we on the MOU? Do we have an MOU?
There is a draft MOU. The Park Commission is at a state now where we would like to sit down with the school committee and discuss it. Had a correspondence with Mike Fontanella this week. He wanted to meet with the Park Commissions, him and Kelly Clenchy. We invited him to I think we decided actually to postpone that for a little bit, get through this process, and we'll reconvene. We're trying to meet with the school committee more or less. We have some concerns that we'd like to flush out.
It seems to me that after receiving Mike's memo, and I think it was sent out to all the selectmen as well as Fincom, right? I mean, you guys got the memo.
Very well written, by the way. Very good document.
That the only field that I know of in the town that is not on school property is Carper.
That's correct.
And
St.
the soccer
St. Anne's.
group. And what?
St.
Anne's, right.
But we also don't own that. Yeah.
Right. So, the soccer group basically takes care of Kerper,
And St.
right?
Anne's, yeah.
And St.
For the most
Anne's.
part.
So all the other fields are on, quote, school property. The schools are collecting revenue from the youth groups for the use of alumni, which is fair. But I'm just wondering if the fields are on their property, shouldn't we just
It's time to move it back.
take, take the rec out of this triangle and have the schools and highway work on maintaining the fields? And if the schools don't fund maintaining the fields, then we should re-elect new school committee members for letting the fields go to hell in a handbasket the way they did before. So I'm just throwing it out there. We don't have an MOU. Maybe it's time to really rethink it.
Well, we do have an MOU.
Well, we have an MOU that is.
It's being reworked, but
Doesn't.
the other MOU is still in place.
Right, but in the new scenario, it doesn't work.
Well, just this discussion of 75% of the volume now is shifted to alumni is enough for me to think that it makes sense to put it back on the old way, where it used to, the schools used to be responsible for the fields, correct, the maintenance.
They had their own maintenance department at one point.
So I don't know what the climate that made it kind of split back up with Park and Rec over the years. Maybe it's time to look at that, shifting it back.
But if the revenue's going to alumni.
Correct, it is. That's
And it's coming away from
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
Your option is either the town taxpayers
Subsidize it.
pick it up, or the users pick it up. And, this is a sort of a two-way discussion when it's a three-way
Right.
issue, but I'm just bringing it up that at least the new MOU hasn't been signed. Is it time to rethink the whole thing?
Yeah.
I don't know, but to me, it's just, clearly, we should have decent fields for the kids to play on. That's number one. But how we fund it and how we manage it, I think should be up for discussion.
My understanding of the revenue that they're collecting for alumni, most of that is paid to janitorial staff, because this is from my understanding, is we have to have somebody there. So what they're collecting is really getting paid out.
Well,
Not going forward, Anthony. So going forward, I'll use football as an example. Football is, we're being charged $5,000 a year, which I'm fine with. But we also pay the janitors separately.
Oh.
And so, we pay a fee of, say, every home game, when we're playing home games, we pay.
The hourly wage, just like if you were renting the gym to play basketball.
Right,
I
right.
thought that was included.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
okay.
and then, and so the 5,000, which I'm fine with, is, goes to maintaining alumni, and then I think part of that is also going into a fund for future, when the carpet gets worn out and they have to replace it.
To me, that's a big issue, and I think we need to have visibility to that and make sure that money is going away and is actually being put away for a new one, so we don't get hit with a big bill 5 years, 10
Or
years
it's,
down the road.
or it's being used to maintain the rest of the fields.
Right, something.
I
But
mean,
we have to have
that's where I
visibility of that
come,
money
then
coming in,
when the
yeah.
carpet does rip, okay, well, that goes in front of the town. I'd rather see it done that way, and then we have to replace it, as opposed to just using that fund to maintain the rest of the fields, because one of our fields is generating the most money.
But it also has, there's a big difference between the ongoing capital costs of that field, right? Bigger capital costs down the road, lower maintenance costs today.
That's right.
Versus higher ongoing maintenance costs for our grass fields and lower capital costs. So the way we're accounting for those needs to be balanced in a way that it captures the long-term capital, and we're not transferring the money spent today for the higher regular maintenance costs of the grass fields. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure we're doing a good job of that.
But that's why I was thinking it was under one, if we were looking at one budget, to see that.
Right, I mean,
It makes sense to be under the school,
Like
that's
I
all.
said, it's a three-way discussion, and only two parties are in the
Right,
room.
so,
But I really think that we have an opportunity to revisit it and figure out what's the most efficient way to make sure the fields that have been brought back up to playing standards are maintained at those standards. And whatever the best way to do it is for the town, I don't really care, but I think it's worth a discussion. I'm sorry, Mike, you were right.
So I would have a concern more as a resident than a commissioner, that if we are giving the schools all this money to maintain our fields, my understanding is that once schools have that money, have their budget, they can do with that money what they want. If they decide they have other priorities besides those fields, do we have any recourse? How do we ensure that our fields don't revert back to where they were if, when it's our line item, we have to spend it?
Right.
When it's theirs, they don't necessarily have to, if I understand.
Well, that's changing.
Well, that's state law, though, too.
That is a law.
That's state law.
But what I'm saying is we can have a fund for the maintenance of the fields, correct?
You could have a separate article where monies could be appropriated and only spent for.
That's probably the direction. I don't know, this
It
is
would-
more of a
it
committee.
would just
and a
be
discussion
beneficial
here.
for that money to go into the DPW, though, because with Chris submitting his invoices over to the school department is crazy. You know, it's just, if we can take the money from that fund and just up Chris's budget, and he's done a fantastic job with the fields. Sean does great work that they do, and it's just easier for them. We certainly don't want to make more administrative duties on there, so I think that budget transfer makes the most sense.
Well, and it's working. I mean, the fields are in good shape. I don't know why we would deviate from what is clearly working from a literal on-the-ground
Well,
source.
but what's changed is the revenue stream. The revenue stream has shifted away from the ability for the town to maintain the fields. Now, if that revenue shift is necessary, truly necessary to keep the carpet swept, or whatever you do to the carpet, then that's okay. And then there's an incremental cost to the town, or to the kids, or to the parents, or whoever, to maintain the grass fields. And that should be right up front. And I think what Alicia's and Mike are bringing forward is, whoops, our revenue is down on where we normally would collect 40,000 or whatever you'd collect for the fields. Now we're only going to be able to collect 24. Okay, where's the other 16 or 20,000 coming from? Is it coming from the operating budget? Is it coming from the revenue stream that shifted to alumni? Where is it coming from? Or have we just created another source of revenue for the school department?
Yeah, I think those are questions for the
That's the
school
question.
department, like Betsy said, is that money going into a fund that's gonna replace the carpet? Well, that might be one thing, but if it's going somewhere else, then maybe it's a reduction of their budget in addition, an increase.
That's all I'm
maybe they're-
saying.
Yep.
And again, it's a
But that's-
three-way discussion
right,
with
that's-
only two
right.
people
Well,
on the road.
If I may, the other thing I think that needs to be brought into this discussion is the Friends of Alumni Field are actively fundraising. They have an account where they're taking in funds earmarked to replace Alumni Field. We need to bring them into this discussion somehow and find out where that money is, what's our agreement with that organization? Because as far as I know, we don't have one in writing.
That's an excellent point.
I think that we really need to.
And there's some real money in there.
There's some real money in there, so.
Those funds don't go through us, Bonnie? They don't have an account?
No, they're
The Friends of Alumni?
No,
they have- They're
a 501c3.
They're a 501c3, but I think in that regard, we do need to have some sort of written agreement.
Well, the
with them.
school's out here now, they should be here in 10 minutes for their
Right.
presentation, so.
Maybe we can.
Well,
Carry it out.
that discussion right there leads you to, okay, now we have two funds serving the same purpose to replace or fix the carpet at alumni.
The intent of the Friends of Alumni Field was to help to fund the investment.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
And if it ends up funding the whole thing, fantastic.
Oh, no, but I think that
Subsidized.
there's a short term and a long term. The short term is, how do we not let the fields deteriorate again?
Correct.
And how do we understand the revenue stream for alumni and what's happening with it? And none of us have those answers, but I think during this budget cycle, we need to come to agreement on who's gonna do what
Right.
and how much the town is gonna fund. And I think, clearly the field shouldn't deteriorate. I don't have an issue with that. But I just don't want to see the money that was going to taking care of the grass fields go off somewhere else, and the grass fields go to hell.
Well, and putting it on Park and Rec, too, if they're not getting the revenue for that.
Right.
Right, and to Anthony's point, if DPW or Highway is actually now responsible to keep the fields up or do the work, maybe some of the money comes from Alicia's group, some of the money comes from the school revenues, the alumni revenues. I don't know where it comes from, but we need to come to agreement. Okay.
And if I may, our department, one of the main reasons that we are involved with this as being kind of that third-party representative is, we're that non-biased organization that's gonna keep people off the fields if we need to be. And then we're also working with the sports organizations to schedule the time on the fields as well. So our park commission does put in time to have those meetings with the sports organizations, and Tom knows he's been to them in the past, that it's a lot of work. So that's something that, I don't see Highway nor the schools taking that piece of the requirement on.
Now,
Yeah.
do you schedule alumni?
No, we do not schedule alumni, but all the other grass fields.
That's
yep,
fine, but
yep.
again, alumni is this
It's a
thing.
separate thing, yep.
That's sort of pulsing, and I think we need to understand the finances wrapped around it.
Sure.
And whatever the town and schools decide to do with that money, they decide to do with that money, but it should be upfront, and it shouldn't just be a black hole that money's going into, and we don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I think we got to a point where we thought we had an MOU that was, everybody was good with.
Well, I brought it to the commissioners, and they had some
Some of
resolutions.
the issues that Alicia just brought up were the issues that the commission as a whole had with the agreement that we had hammered out over the course of several months.
There were some other issues as well. So we're working on those.
Right.
Well, and the Board of Selectmen as a body hasn't seen the draft MOU as part of a meeting at all.
Correct.
So you may be comfortable with it, but the Board of Selectmen hasn't commented on it in any
So,
capacity.
That's essentially
it wasn't worth coming to you guys because by the
No,
time
I understand.
PRCE
I want to make it
I can-
clear, though, that I like the way it's structured, that we should have
Right.
representatives,
Right.
but we're a ways from agreeing.
Okay.
And I think that we're all kind of right around it, but Anthony's point about Chris having the funding.
Absolutely. But
And no disrespect intended, but I don't think that the commissioners or Park and Rec should be the gatekeepers of the fields that reside on school properties. I think it should either be the people that are maintaining it or the people that own it.
Well, you guys fight that out.
Well, it was structured that way at one point in time because all of the revenues that were coming in for any of the youth sports were being funneled through Park and Rec. That's why at one point in time, Park and Rec was involved with that, was dispersing that money to.
Right, because the schools wanted to get out of the business years ago. I mean,
Well,
the schools, you hang around here long enough and you see the movie.
We eliminated the Park and Rec maintenance department.
How long have you been
essentially,
around,
that's what
Fred?
happened.
Too long.
It's like a remake.
Yeah, okay.
So I think the one thing that we can't lose sight of too is that, in funding Chris and the DPW, yes, they do the maintenance on the fields, but they also do, with the same exact equipment, all the maintenance on the parks. And that was something that we discussed last year, that our parks are severely underfunded and undermanned, and, we were looking at a head count of 6 that we never established or came back to and said, we really need to fund Chris with more staffing or figure out a solution to that. Because right now we're at a standstill. We've had opportunities to have parks, design parks, put more stuff into the community. One of the things that we brought forth when Keith was still here was the 10-minute walk project, which is an initiative to have a park within a 10-minute walk of everyone in the community. And the real thing that shut down the most recent project that we had planned 6 months ago was Chris said, you guys can't build a park, I can't mow it. Unless you guys find somebody to mow it and pay the wages to do it, there's no way over my dead body are you guys gonna build a park. So we really need to think about that because, you know, that's the other piece that DPW does and why this funding is so important. It's not just the grass fields. You know, we have a lot of people in this town who do sports, but we also have a lot of families in this town who need more playgrounds, who need Fay Park to be mowed. We're doing more and more special events every year. So as a whole, you know, as parks and fields, we have to look at, and we can't forget that, you know, we're way under that projection of 6 staff members. I think we have Sean and definitely one guy, sometimes 2 guys out there, you know, working like crazy all summer.
Take them.
If I may, just to Chuck's point, you know, I know in my memo I said Parks and Recs are requesting $20,000 to help us with the fields. We, as a commission, we don't care if that money comes to us or it goes to Chris. We just don't feel comfortable asking the youth sports organizations to pay more than $24,000. So that's all I was trying to get to. If it goes to Chris, that's fantastic. I think it makes sense, but, you know.
Yep.
100%.
All right, so.
It's all
Back
good.
to the budget
It's all
stuff.
good.
All right, so the budget requests that I made for 2020, the continued funding for the salary and benefits of the park director and the assistant director. I'm also requesting for the subsidy of 30% of the wages and benefits of the community education and teen program coordinator and the administrative assistant positions. A couple years back, we did a cost analysis report, and they said that essentially we were operating at about 70% sustainability. So we were able to provide 70% of the revenue to cover the programs. So the 2 positions that we have that have the least amount of revenue to sustain them would be those 2 positions that I was asking for the 30%. So that's one of the requests for 2020. And then the other would be a minimal amount. We do have certifications and memberships that we're trying to maintain and keep our staff at that higher level. So since Tim came in, we've really been involved with Red Cross and doing the training. Also with U.S. Sailing, we're going to have to send staff out to be trained specifically to run their programming, since it's a nationally affiliated program. So we're asking for, it's like $5,525 to be able to pay for those sort of workshops and certifications and trainings and memberships to keep us up to date and current with the state and on a national level. So that's, as far as budget requests, like that's it for the level funding piece of it. Are there any questions about any of those?
No, this number jumps out at me, 85% increase in program participation, I keep looking at.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that the sailing program, but that can't be all of that. What do you attribute that to mostly?
So it's a lot of everything. So we had
Marketing.
staffing. What's that?
Is it marketing?
Some of it is the marketing.
So
we
we-
really, when Anthony came on a year ago, he really encouraged us to update the brochures.
Yeah.
So we did do that. That's had a large piece of it. Our recreational software program is easier for people to use online, so
better.
that's happened.
And one thing that, when I came on board from my previous career, that we used a lot of was Facebook and Google Analytics.
Yeah.
So we're spending a lot of money investing, close to, I think it was $5,000 in the past period, in the past 2 years, in doing that targeted marketing and things like that to bring more people in. So, if you look at our events page from our side, we can see for Fire and Ice Next in 2 weeks, for example,
Yeah.
we've had 43,000 people visit our event page and 2,600 respond that they're going to possibly be coming to the event. So we're really, getting that broad reach of our consumers. We're really dialing things in. John Kazanjian, brought in one of the residents who's part of the Constant Contact Group, which is a new program that we're using to get more targeted, specific emails out there to our users who specifically have used programs in the past and bring them back into the. So through all of these things, that's why we're with this specific target. And, really just, I think that we've really done a lot with our consumer relations in the past 2 years, that we've gotten people back in the door who weren't using Park and Recreation. We increased our Camp Tahadawan numbers from 130 to 180 participants. We, last year, increased Camp Tahadawan by 1 week, which is about, that's probably 10% of an increase over previous years. And then our track program last year was much more utilized than previous years. And then this year, we actually have seen a slip in the task program a little bit, but that's why we renovated 123. So all of these targeted things are specific examples of why we've seen such a huge increase in our numbers.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And we're also trying to fill in some of the gaps that have been missing. So one of the things that Katie and Rachel, so our community education and teen program coordinator and the teen program lead, they've created this like outdoor adventures program. So that's something that they've been doing on a seasonal basis that's actually taking off, and it's awesome to get the kids out, outdoors and really. So they're finding niches in that specific, world, which we really do want to get people out and, outdoors. So so there's all these different programs and special events, especially, the special events that we've increased. We do get more people that have attended. I mean, instead of it being a couple hundred people, we're now a couple thousand. So it's a big difference.
One of the other things that we attacked this year was our partnerships with the community. So rather than us say, would you like to teach a class and this is what's going to, there's already classes out there that are existing. We're, fighting a very small niche in the fitness community, which is packed, jam full. There's 4 spots just at the point right up the road. So we've increased our partnerships. So hey, you're already running a class. How about run one for us?
How about free tennis? Isn't that
What's that?
The free tennis?
Oh,
Enough of this.
Body blow.
So we are partnering with a lot of these groups, and we have a wonderful tennis instructor who is doing really well. She introduced pickleball to us. We have a pickleball league starting 2 seasons this year. So different opportunities that we've asked in our surveys that we put out there to the community that we're trying to hit those niche spots that people are really looking for. More preschool programming, things of that nature that aren't around.
Just awesome growth.
Can we sort of move it along? I know we're the ones that are dragging this out, not you, but if we
absolutely.
can,
It's all the color.
So, like I said, that's it for the budget requests, and then the capital, I just wanted to go through that really quickly. So the $50,000 for the major equipment, that's something we've always asked for year after year. It really helps us keep the parks maintained when we need them to be. We're also looking at $25,000 for a new dock for the sailing program. And one of the big things that kind of broke, I think, both of our hearts is like there's nowhere for people to really genuinely fish. And people do love to come down to Long Lake to be able to fish. So with this dock, we'd be able to create kind of like a T spot. So at the end of the dock, there would be space for people to actually go out and fish. And that's something that, we can work with the environmental police and come up with policies and things like that. But it's something that, the community desperately wants. You see people down there and kids, families that are down there with their fishing poles, and we kind of have to turn them away or have them go to a different part of the lake. So we want to bring them into the fray of being
Not
there
next to the
as well.
swimmers is a good idea.
That's the thing, that's why. We have to keep them separate from the swimmers.
So, So, we have the other dock we could utilize, possibly come up with another area over off Lake Shore to maybe create a little area over there with the new dock implemented. The big thing with the new dock that it affords is not only with the fishing opportunities, but there's, for people utilizing the boat ramp on the state level as well, there's nowhere for them to dock their boats, especially when they're loading and unloading. So they're grounding their boats, which is a safety risk not only to those users, but people who might be standing on the beach, might be standing wherever it might be. So this affords an opportunity. The length of this dock is able to moor a boat. We could see anywhere from 5 to 6 usable spots for the boats that, loading and unloading. The other side, it gives us the ability to actually moor the sailboats. Currently, they're moored out in the water. The kids swim out there in the morning, they swim out there in the afternoon and swim back to get the boats. So this gives us, you can walk out to your boat, you can get on the boat, you can rig it. It's all, in a much safer environment. And it also gives us the ability to rig and lock our safety vessels that we have to have for our program and keep out there on a basis. One of the things I was able to do last year with the dock we had is we left our Zodiac out there, all year for the length of the season. And, in the event of an after-hours emergency, FD and everybody else had a key. They could get to it. They could operate in a boat and respond to anything that was happening on the lake. So this helps increase all of those things.
Another piece on there is $60,000. This was something that I worked with Chris Stoddard on for the parking at Fay Park. So, one of the things that I'm sure we've all seen is that the parking, especially at the parks or in town in general, is very lacking. For when we have events that happen in 300 King, people will park down at Town Hall and walk down there, and, we have to have detail at different places. So this is something that would allow us to not only add more parking at Fay Park, which is where, we have their Thursdays and other community, or different organizations in the community use it for special events as well. But we would also be able to deal with some of the AAB, ADA accessibility issues that we have, because it's not currently graded properly to allow access. So,
Where'd that go? Where at Fay Park was that parking
Along
be?
Foster.
What's that?
Along Foster, right?
So there's a couple different options that we could try to do. So yeah, we could do Foster. I think what we talked about the most would be moving the park in a little bit on Wilderness, and being able to put them in that way, because I
Diagonal
think,
spacing on Wilderness.
yeah, I think that's going to be the safest option, because if we start looking at Foster, it is parallel parking out there, or even diagonal it's a. I think it makes the police department a little nervous.
Critical lane for the fire department, and police department.
Yep. So we do have to work out some of those pieces, but, to be able to get additional parking that's in there, which currently for the park itself, there is none. People do have to park at the fire station and walk up.
I'm sorry, and I don't want to go, but
Yeah.
those kind of options don't, you're not talking about adding 100 parking spots, though.
No,
So you're
not at all.
It's not a lot that you're
Not
talking
at all.
about.
Right, how
Yeah.
many are we talking about?
So whatever we
Round
can
numbers.
get in, and we're not talking about 100, we're probably talking about maybe 10,
Yeah,
I'm
I'd
thinking
say.
15 at the most.
10 or
It's
15 with
really-
those options, yeah.
We are, you look at the park, you're limited on what you can add. We don't want to take away from the park itself, it's just to be able to provide access, that's all. Yeah, no,
10 to
we,
15 spaces used, at most a dozen times a year, otherwise.
oh, it'll be used more than that, yeah,
Church using.
definitely way more than that.
Because there's also really no parking up at the White Barn, which a lot of people park on the side of the road there.
Yep.
So, when it comes to utilizing the trail system on the Proudy property, it's also an opportunity for there, because it's just another place.
And then we did have the new field creation on there. It's in italics because we still don't have an idea of when we'd be able to start that project, but that, when we talk about capital, we're talking about planning out for years. So that is something that, we want that to be current, and on there, that process that you are aware of.
Do you have an idea of what kind of field?
So it would just be like a multi-use, yeah, multi-use. So.
Thanks, Captain.
We're going to put your bubble.
We're gonna, fix your bubble. So that would be like a multi-use, it would be specific to any certain sport, but we would try to get it to be the dimensions as large as we could, just to be able to, because all the different sports play at different, dimensions of field. So we don't want to just have like a field that's okay to do practice, we want them to actually be able to play games and be able to line it. Exactly, that would be the ideal.
With adequate parking.
With
Can
adequate.
Can I just comment on that? And this is more directed towards the Board of Selectmen. I think we need to look at that parcel A, because driving by, it doesn't look that big.
It's not, so.
So it looks
Yes.
like there was some encroachment on it at some point, so I think we just really need to,
Go back to the deed.
take a look at it and see
Some
what's
homework for
really
us.
there that we can work with.
Yeah.
Was a survey done at the time? I wasn't on the board then. Do you remember, Joe? Was the survey done?
I'm not sure there was a survey.
Well, there was everything that came, yeah, there definitely was, because they presented to the planning board, and they had to have stamped plans.
That doesn't
Parcel
mean,
A.
it may not, did they do the internal survey?
Yeah, I believe
too?
they were delineated. I'd have to go back and look.
It was.
I thought it was.
So we have gone out and done measurements, and at this point in time, it doesn't seem that we would be able to get the field that we need.
Right.
And parking.
Right.
It would be, you can get a field in there with no parking, but that doesn't solve.
Unless
the
we're
whole
able to
problem.
capture some more land back that maybe we should have got.
So, well, and this is I guess, a different conversation for another time,
Right.
but, do we look at swapping A with B if that's even possible? Because B does have the ability to house parking and a full field.
It's a longer
Yeah.
stretch.
It is. So, I know we had already gone to town meeting and we made that vote, but that was at the point in time where, it seems that it would work, but at this point in time with the measurements that are there, it does not.
That is a pretty deep conversation. because
It is,
let's not take
correct.
those
As I said,
properties and so-
that's not a here and now, but that is a very good point. Thank you for making that.
Right. The only other thing I wanted to mention to Alicia, with the $60,000 for the ADA standards for Fay Park, there are grants available for municipalities. And I know that the Disabilities Commission actually has evaluated all of our playing fields.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know that they have a written report, but they have gone to all the fields and come up with a summary of what's needed to bring those up to ADA compliance. We had a discussion at one of our board of selectmen meetings about the gate specifically at the high school.
Okay.
If someone's in a wheelchair, they can't get through there,
Right.
they can't get to the softball field in the back. So that might be a good discussion to have with Diane Corey.
Yeah,
and see
absolutely.
what data they've gathered,
Okay.
and then maybe we can circle back around and look on the state website and see what grant funding's available.
Awesome, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, we'd have to do an assessment first,
Yeah.
like a lot of those programs. You do the assessment, that makes you eligible for other ADA.
Right,
grants.
and so I know Diane Corey and the Disabilities Commission has been gathering information, so we should see what they have.
Yeah, we should.
And see what we can come up with.
Yes, sir.
Perhaps it's just me, but we've had this discussion about everything here except nowhere unless I get my calculator out and go page by page. Can you tell me what your budget request is? What's the amount? It's not
You guys
written out
have-
here anywhere.
So, let me summarize that for you. The Park and Rec Enterprise Fund is about $1 million enterprise fund, and of that, 20% is supported by the general fund, so just over $200,000. The $200,000 subsidy is tied to salaries and benefits for the directors and 30% of the administrative staff. Their request would be to cover 100% of the administrative staff, which would be your enterprise subsidy.
That's mission.
Your mission budget request would cover 100% of that, and that would be an increase of about $150,000. So to keep it at the level staffing budget, the subsidy would go from $211,000 to $236,000. So that's the impact to the general fund, and that's what we've been doing for the past several years. Alicia was really helpful. We did a lot of work with the munis conversion and setting up the new chart of accounts, so that you'll see now, going forward, the revenue for each individual program and the expense for each individual program, and that wasn't really transparent in the old system. So as we go forward and build data, you're going to see how much, beach receipts versus beach expense, T, wages versus their expenditures. But yeah, the impact for this discussion is the increase of 211 to 236, which again just keeps them on par with where they've been in the past.
That account
Thank
number-
you.
That account number on the front page, 6304972, is staff.
Well, I'm glad you explained that, because I'm looking at this page and I certainly doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah. We'll be changing these as we go forward. Once we bring payroll on, the reports become much more robust.
And the enterprise fund is fairly unique as far as the departments we're looking at. There's only one other one, right? The water.
Water and electric.
All right, so I have other stuff, but I will let you guys do your thing. Thank you very much for your time. Come down and see us. We're glad to have you guys in the community around anytime, and definitely come out on the 12th to see the renovations in 123. That'd be awesome.
Great.
All right, thank you.
I
Take care.
apologize.
Thank you, everybody.
Great work. Heard you got some work to do to make up time here. Heard you got some work to do to make up the time.
Right.
sorry?
5-minute time? I just wanted to know
Sure,
whatever.
go ahead.
It's only a one-person stall.
There you go, right.
Unless you're gonna share.
You can't get into one of the cells.
Thanks, Seth.
Sword, streams.
Sorry.
I am too. I need to get
Thank you.
I don't know there's a sign that says, there's signs that say hard stop and do it for lunch.
So, private lot,
Good
private
sentence.
entity, public building, town line.
Hard stop, hard stop.
Give me a contact, and I'll,
Where's lunch, guys?
I'll work this out.
Bonnie,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Bonnie, right? Where's lunch, guys?
Are they really?
That all goes back to the Paul Williams days, when he was pushed off all the costs and took in all this anywhere he could.
We're on break, right?
You can't blame us. Finishing one piece at a time.
Is it specifically targeted for replacement, and is that the only thing it can be used for?
It's similar to the Fizzle. Fizzle charges for maintenance.
Okay. So not necessarily.
Really?
It's not necessarily. They don't, they charge you going.
I was trying to keep those months open for you.
I know, thank you.
If you give me the information, I'd love to stop to see them, because I think.
I will see what I can find on the fence. There's a game going on.
Are you good with safety?
Oh, yeah, that's bad, yeah. That answers my question.
So something like that.
Consolidation.
And that's okay, we just need to be clear on, when people start looking at that, oh, that's the solution, it's like, well, and I don't think
No. I think nobody was counting on it. I'd almost forgot, well, really? I mean, I've almost forgot it was there.
Well, depending on what the, I had no idea what the financial results were. But if you're, that money, so it should be in, I know.
How would we know? We don't.
That's the problem. Then the other question is, with the money coming in there, but we really don't
This thing is online, just as much We're at about 6 years of a 2-year
You know,
plan.
the other side is, we should want, that's the part that kills me. They should want to provide that. Why aren't we there?
I blame Fontanella.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. Wake them up.
Capital, it's for capital, whatever, however you define capital.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Back in session.
Interview type thing where we talked about the basketball program.
Thanks for meeting with me.
Yep.
So for level budget this year, we're requesting the standard step increases, and the increase in our books budget of about $13,722. That combined with what we get from friends, what we get from the trustees, and what we get from donations will help us to be certified for next year. And that's really the only big changes over the previous years. The requests that we put in for our yearly fee to LVLC, our consortium, is actually less this year. So there's an increase of about 4.09% variance over last year, and last year was actually 7.51% over the previous year, so it's actually less. In our 2020 budget, 2020 mission budget, sorry.
Excuse me, and why is MBLC down?
Just good management on their side. And,
Okay.
Yeah, and they
Okay.
received some grants.
Great.
So do you think that'll go back up in '21 because of the grants, or?
No, actually, it's going to increase by a little bit, but not a huge amount. Talking a couple $100. In our mission budget for 2020, I'm requesting an increase to my assistant director's hours from 30 to 35 hours. She's not just our assistant director, she also does double duty. She's our technical services librarian. So that means she covers every single book that comes in the library, she processes them, she catalogs them. That, in addition to all the stuff she does as my assistant director, I think it just kind of would be a good thing for her to increase her hours so that she can get everything done that she gets done in less time, less hours, sorry. And I'm also requesting an increase to our library assistants. We have 2 library assistants right now that are about 6 hours each. That's a big difference from the majority of the staff, so I'd like to take them from 6 to 10 hours so that it at least reflects what they do for us as well. And also it helps with coverage for the library. It's a busy library and we need a lot of coverage sometimes at the desk, and having these positions with more hours would be very helpful. So that's a total increase of about $30,000 to salary, and increase of FTE from 8.2 to about 8.4, I believe. So that's actually only a 6.46% increase in the variance, which is again less than what I asked for last year. So that's it for the budget. It's basically.
Now, the money we spend on quote books, is it shifting to more e-books?
Right, so
or-
we call it books, but it's books, DVDs, databases, e-books.
Materials.
Yeah, materials, basically.
Right.
It should probably be called materials.
Clearly, it
Yeah.
is a shift.
I don't know if there's that much of a shift towards the ebooks, but we're getting more databases, like, you just got Wall Street Journal and.
Right, I just got the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, and the Washington Post online. We have the New York Times online. So that was about $3,000, $4,000. I'm getting a new database for patrons to watch movies online. That's about another $1,500. So, you know, the increase, we find other things like online, electronic versions of things to go with that. Which our patrons like.
I don't know if it's the books versus the ebooks, but there's other electronic services that are really growing more than ebooks.
But it is shifting a little bit from the whole written page.
Right, like magazine subscriptions and things like that. There's a large, you can get a lot of those online that the library doesn't actually have physical copies of.
And a lot of this comes from patron requests. Like I had a patron ask if we get the Boston Globe online. And so I was able to get Boston Globe, Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal.
So is that you come into the library, look, or somehow you can do
You
it
can
from
do it
home
from-
and you can do it?
Yeah, from your
Yep.
Kindle or iPad.
To your account, you log into your account. and-
Yeah, you just need your library card.
Really?
How many?
Yeah, yeah, really. I
Wow.
know, I was just thinking that too. I can
That's
save some
great.
money.
I know, as things start to go behind paywalls, it really.
What's that?
I said, as those things start to go behind paywalls, it makes a big difference.
We need to sign up the Park and Rec PR department to get your word out a little bit, what you're offering there.
Sam, quick question for you. What's the trend for library cards? I mean, how many do you have on an annual basis? How many do you have out there?
We have about 6,000 active library cards.
Has that gone up, down? What's the trend on that? Flat?
Yeah, it goes up every year and goes, you know, we delete some if people move out, die, that sort of thing. But yeah, as more families move in, we find a lot of families actually say, we go to your library first to make sure before we move to the town, because they love libraries and they love our staff, and they say, oh, I decided to move here because your library staff was great, and we love your library.
So about 6,000?
Yeah, yeah.
And that trend has been pretty steady?
Yeah.
Just curious more than anything
Like
else.
70% of the town, I think.
Our circulation numbers from year to year are up. They're not increasing, I think, at the same rate as they were like 5 years ago, but the numbers are we're still going up. I don't know the exact counts, but.
Where,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Where are things like passes and other?
That comes from our Friends group. Our Friends group.
That's fully funded by Friends?
Yeah, they spend about $8,000 every year on our museum passes.
Okay.
In addition to what they give us for programs, they give us about another $5,000 for programs. And that all comes from money they raise and donations, member fees.
Any other questions before we go on to
I was
capital?
going to say, any capital requests this year?
Funny you should ask.
Okay, so last July, MBLC made the announcements of where everybody is on the list of the 33 libraries that applied for the grants. All 33 libraries received something. Only 9 libraries received it in July, and then everybody else was put on a waiting list. We were originally number 5 when that first came out. Now we're number 1. So we're next. So there are 3 libraries that were given it recently. They still have until this month to, so everybody who gets it, you get 6 months from when you're told. They still have this month to basically go ahead. I think a few of them requested extensions, so it might go a little longer. But we're looking to, we'll probably hear in July. So that's where we're at. Right now, we have been getting donations and pledges that altogether that's over 600.
Yeah, we have, between the cash we have on hand and the pledges we have, over $600,000 fundraised for a new library.
And the grant will be for $5.8 million. That is not given out all at once. It's given out at 20% increments over 5 years. You have to reach certain benchmarks before you can go to the next one.
Is that for certain you're gonna get that amount? Because I thought the grant was up to 40% or something like that?
No, it's 5.8.
So it's 5.8 million?
That was just when we were talking about applying. Everybody gets up to a certain amount. But once they made the announcement, that's how much you get.
And this 13.1 million, is that current? Is that accounted for, cost increases in construction and all that stuff?
Right, so that 13.1 million accounted for a 3%.
5%.
5% escalation costs.
For 3 years.
Yeah, for 3 years. Current climate and increases in tariffs on steel and things like that. But some of the items on this list, like the land, I think it's about $150,000 that they estimate the land. We're not spending $150,000 because we already got the land. There's some other things like furniture for the last 2 or 3 years. We've got in our capital budgets about $7,500 for new furniture. So we can take that furniture with us to the new building. So there are certain areas where we can cut costs and eliminate.
The reason the land is on there is because we get reimbursed. That's part of your 45% or whatever number. So we went through the process of getting the lot surveyed and appraised so that we could get money back from the state for that. So it's shown on as a cost, but it's really not a cost. It's a benefit coming back. So.
And then once the building is complete, we're aiming to build a LEED certified building. So we'd get at least $100,000 back if it's certified. It could be more than that, but
minimum would get us 100.
That'd be an additional potential 100K.
And then
So-
Mark is gonna.
So I met with Bonnie and Fred on Thursday, and their suggestion was to go forward in the May special town meeting and ask for the money to cover the library out to construction bid, so all your professional so that on your sheet is roughly items 9 through 26 on this, the old man-friendly sheet, which is 1.3 million. With the escalation, it's about another 200,000. So if we went with that whole number, somewhere between 1.3 and 1.6 million, we would be asking for in May. With the idea that we'll ask for the remainder in October once we have the grant. We've started the discussions with PMPC to get on their radar so that if the money's approved in May, at the May 1st town meeting, May 2nd, we'll be ready to be up and running to see how far we can get before October.
Yeah.
Right. And this is basically we're kind of starting the process over again, but from a better position, right? So we have rough schematics for the new building. We'll be going through that phase again, so we know where the building's going to be and approximately how big it's going to be. But everything in the building and the looks of the building can be rearranged between May and October, right? So after October, it will be more or less set, I believe. But
What's the ask at town meeting? Is it just the 1.3 mil, or is it for the whole project?
so in May, we would be asking for the 1.3-ish number.
Okay.
In October, we would be asking for the rest, presuming that the grant was awarded in July.
So, Mark, were you going to add in the 139,000?
Right, so,
The
but
43 for escalation?
for the actual number in May, I think we need to work a little more closely with you and Bonnie and to figure out which of these numbers we actually need, like, do you need the clerk of the works number in May, or do you ask for that later, right? And just refine the it's between 1.3 and 1.6. I don't know what the number is, but we can work that out over the next, few months before we have to before the.
And working that out is associated with just modifying the scope, not necessarily each cost of each line item, but what goes into that, is that right?
It's more, I think it's going through what the line items are, what line items we need to ask for in May, but I'm not really, this is outside of my
You would
purview.
not need a clerk of the works in May.
So, yeah. So it's going through this sheet and basically figuring out which ones we need to do before we can, to generate the construction documents. And I believe all of them are, 9 through 26 plus the increases, right? But I'm not
It
positive.
would basically be design and OPM services.
So then next January is when you would tell the state, well, based on our town meeting
Well-
in November, a special town meeting.
Yeah.
You have till when, I guess?
We have until January.
You do have till January.
If we get the grant in July, we have until
Okay.
January, effectively, without an extension.
Okay. Good.
So realistically, the
Special town
the
meeting.
special, the fall special, if it can fit, if it can't, then it would have to be a special.
So there'd be a presentation in May at town meeting, it talks to this a little bit. and
Yep.
Maybe a little more to
Yep.
boost the town meeting
Yep.
preparation.
We're already working on plans to do public outreach,
Yep.
starting probably in March, holding forums about what the library means and start talking more about the breakdown in the timelines and things like that.
And the reason we suggested coming to May with the, whatever design money we need is we generally like to go to town meeting with bid documents.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Right. So rather than just, we think it might be this much, even with bid documents, it's not always 100% accurate, but it's a hell of a lot closer than putting your thumb up in the wind. So that's why when we met earlier this week, we said, this is why our recommendation was to come forward with this approach. You get the design, and then if you come back in the fall or whenever you come back, you've got better numbers to ask the town.
And we'll be circulating around all the various boards in town to start talking to them. I mean, like, this is hot off the presses to do something in May as of 2 days ago, so.
So it's a question for Bonnie, how's this 1.3 going to be funded if it's approved?
It would be a debt exclusion ballot. We have more than replaced all of the debt that we had paid down over the past several years with the completion of alumni.
Is that for May or for October?
Yeah, you have to borrow that in May. So we have to schedule, we have to get on the board's radar because only the board can call a ballot vote, Board of Selectmen. And then it would be a similar vote in the fall for the construction. We do have to authorize the full.
2 ballots.
Yes.
2 ballot votes. for this.
Although effectively, the vote for the first one is a vote for the second one, because you're not going to spend 1.3 million unless we're assuming we're going to go forward.
Correct.
So obviously, the positioning has to be that. If you're, no, you disagree?
Yeah. No, it's like the
Doesn't
sewer.
always
It's
work
like the
that way.
septic, the same.
Yeah, it's 1.3 million.
Right, but the sewer was 2.5 to get all this pre-work done. Yes, it's a
Okay.
good faith thing.
Yep. Okay,
So
but
now, you're right, everything is leading towards that, but you never know, 2 different
Well,
votes.
Police station is a good example. We did all this preliminary work there and spent several $1 million, and town meeting said no. 2-3 years.
Yeah.
It's like 4 years later that they finally agreed to build it, so.
But I think part of our positioning should be when you're voting for this, I mean, effectively, you're voting to go forward with the library.
Yeah.
The first one, the 1.3 isn't a, gee, how's it gonna look and how's it gonna work? It's just, we're gonna go forward and this is the first step of it.
Right, you
I mean, we just, right? I mean.
Yeah, no, I agree with the premise. I absolutely, yeah.
I think the key is just making that point over and over again so people get it.
Yeah.
But the point is, you get another bite at the apple.
That's true, too.
You got- I'm sorry, say what?
No, I mean, you get another bite at the apple.
Oh, yeah, you do,
know,
yeah.
And so everybody's aware
Yeah.
of the process. As long as, it's all up front, and I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Right, and I mean, the idea is, right, if the cost, we get the bid documents and all of a sudden the library is gonna be $20 million, well, that's a different
right,
thing,
yeah.
you know? Not that I think that happens, but there is a second
And
bite.
that's why you have the second vote.
Yep. So, another question is just the state money, I mean, when do we come, how does this funding work in terms of when does that actually come in and so on?
So it's a reimbursement over 5 years, I believe, so it's.
So you have
it's
to fund
about
the whole thing
$1
up
million a
front.
year. Yes.
And then you get it back over time?
Correct. So what we do is a combination of short and long-term borrowing. We would short-term borrow the 5.8 million, because we plan on paying that down over the 5 years that we ban it. And then we bond the remainder of the construction costs. And that would be over 20 years.
You would pay off the bands with the money as it comes in from the state. That's theoretically how the timing would work. We might get into a short-term gap where the town has to fund and then get the money back, but
Okay.
that's
All
the
right.
goal.
Yep, that makes sense, good, thank you.
And where do the donations for the new library fit into the 2-vote funding scheme? Have we worked that out?
We haven't.
We haven't worked out the details on the vote, but whatever is available from the donations would be, we would bond the full amount, no matter what.
Okay.
We would request the authorization to bond the full 14 million, 13 million, whatever it is. What we would actually bond would be much less, because we wouldn't be bonding the 5.8. I need the authorization so that I can borrow it short-term, but we wouldn't actually bond it permanently. And we'd also not bond the amount that was available through donations. So then we would go back to town meeting and say we need to rescind this authorization for the 5.8 plus whatever donation.
So the number that folks could actually see in the fall would be 13 and change.
13 and
On the
change
article.
minus the
No,
1.5
absolutely.
or whatever.
Absolutely, and
Correct.
part of the presentation would be, the gross is 13, there's 5.8 comes off, there's 600,000 or 700,000 that they add in.
Our goal is $1 million, and I think, and we have 600 now. I think once this becomes more concrete, I think we will hit $1 million.
So, I mean, yeah, that's how a piece of the presentation I'm not going to stand up and make it, but I would assume.
Were you going to ask her to do it?
Pretty good job right now.
And would you be proposing to bring any of that donation money to bear in the spring?
We haven't talked about any of this yet, so it's too early to say.
Be a good faith effort,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Okay.
Skin in the game and all that.
Good, right. So basically, you guys are taking the lead You're drawing PMBC in to make sure that, you know, you guys are at least
Yeah, the
comfortable with it.
library will be on our next meeting agenda.
And then obviously selectmen and everybody else will begin to see their smiling faces for
We'll
presentations.
probably have you in soon to
I
make
think
the
we're trying to get on your agenda
request.
for the last meeting in January.
Okay, so that's,
I've sent an email to Anthony,
All right.
the 28th. Hopefully, we can get on the agenda that day.
Okay, great. Okay, good luck. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry to keep you.
We are keep going.
Hot off the press.
Forgot to put the capital in the,
All right, did they get the thing I sent out yesterday? Okay.
Rot matrix printer here, Mike?
No, it was a PDF to a PDF to a laser printer, but
I thought it was a fax machine.
I was going to try and convert it to Word and then do it, but I was doing it this morning, so it wasn't my
I
best
don't
day.
know, I thought it, tell me.
Is this just one sheet, Mike?
It's one sheet, two sides.
One sheet, two sides. Okay, so take one. It's like a game of telephone, but it's not
Yep.
all the way around.
All right, so I sent out a memo yesterday with the presentation that we're going to go over today, similar to what we've done in past years. The first slide talks about our overall projected increases to maintain level services and staffing. We see the salary increases, which is about what we expect to see. The increase in sped out of district, we typically expect to see an increase, but this is a very large increase, and we'll talk about that in more detail as we go through the presentation. Transportation costs are rising for students who are part of the CASE Special Ed Collaborative and other out-of-district programs that require transportation. We've also included an increase in the appropriated budget to support the phase-in for full-day kindergarten. And the operational expenses is for our HVAC service contract is up for renewal. And that's an estimate on what we think it's going to increase. The salary increases to retain current staffing level is the steps and lanes. It does not currently include any adjustments for staff replacements due to retirements or staff leaving the district for other reasons. As far as I know, we haven't had any notifications of retirements yet, other than we learned last spring that our sped director was retiring, but we put someone in place already. The out-of-district increases of $636,000. Our original budget for out-of-district tuition for FY19 was $2.74 million. We had some students that either moved into the district or were already in the district but had required more services. So in FY19, we've already seen an increase over the original budget of $347,000, which we're covering through school choice. And trying to find some efficiencies in the budget so that we're not going to necessarily cover the entire $347,000 out of school choice, but it's going to be the bulk of it. We already have some students that have moved into the district that, because of the timing when they moved into the district, they're receiving services, but they're being paid by their previous district. We will absorb that cost in FY20. That's another $288,000. The next slide shows that our projected costs, adding in what we unexpectedly have to pay in FY19, the projected increase for FY20, we're up to almost $3.4 million. Our current appropriated budget is $1.9 million. We're projecting circuit breaker reimbursement of around a little over $800,000. So the total revenue that we have earmarked so far for sped out of district
based on the current budget, is $2.7 million, and again, that creates a deficit right now in terms of planning spending of that $636,000. Next slide shows, we did an analysis of, why is this number going up? Are we having more students, or is it, more services? And it's really more services. You can see here from 2014 to 2020, the number of students that we have in the district that require out-of-district placement is between 36 and 40. It hasn't moved dramatically. As a matter of fact, it goes up and down year by year, one or two at a time. The problem is that the cost, just because we lose students, doesn't move linearly, because the students that come in to replace them oftentimes require more services. You can look at, we projected we'll actually have 2 fewer students receiving out of districts in FY20, but the average cost per student is going to go up 15%. It's up to $88,000. And you can see at the bottom, it's a distribution from the last 2 years of students receiving services bucketed by how much tuition is required to cover the services they need. This year, everybody's $150,000 or lower, Next year, it's going to get spread out where you're going to have, 3 students getting over $150,000 in services. So that's where the impact is.
Is this, in this analysis, is this the fact that we lost a town as well?
So that is on the transportation side, that is part of, yes.
It is part of it.
On the the $50,000 increase in case and out-of-district transportation, yes, part of the impact is one community dropped out of the case collaborative. But that's not impacting this amount. This is just for our students receiving out-of-district services and the tuition that we pay. We've also had our providers upped their rates outside of the budget cycle. So FY19, we're going with what the rates they're charging after the budget's approved. They go through their budget cycle, and some of the tuition rates went up. So adding in the amount of the type of service they require, and the providers increasing their tuition fees, and you see the impact. So the case transportation amount is for case and other out-of-district placements, not just case, but it is students requiring more transportation, but also we did have a community leave the collaborative, so we were able to spread the pain around a little bit. There's a little fewer people to spread the pain around. Right. Like when I say spread the pain, I'm talking about if the van's running, they pick some students up in Littleton, and then they go to so-and-so, and you can share that cost. Well, there's one less community to pick up from. So not quite sure why it makes sense to them, but I guess they have their reasons. The other thing that we feel strongly we need to support with the appropriated budget is the phase-in for tuition-free full-day kindergarten. 2 years ago, there was significant community advocacy for tuition-free full-day kindergarten. When we first instituted full-day kindergarten, many districts charged tuition. However, the trend over recent years has been towards a tuition-free model, and we are actually one of the outliers in the sense that we are one of the few that still charges tuition. We subsequently committed to a 5-year phase-in because we felt it would be too much of an impact on the budget to do it all at once or any quicker than that. It's going to cost, our model is about $75K a year to replace the amount of expenses that have been supported by tuition. However, in the past 2 years, even though we've made the commitment to that, due to other budget priorities and constraints, both on the school side and the town side, we've had to support the phase-in with school choice funds. And you can see that we've made the commitment, we've held to it by using the school choice funds. We've gone from $4,000 a year to $2,500 a year in tuition. The goal is to next year be at $1,750, and then 2 years later down to $0. But again, it assumes that we're going to continue to be able to replace the tuition revenue flow with revenue from the appropriated budget. The next slide talks about school choice and the impact that full-day tuition or tuition-free full-day kindergarten has, along with other things that we've used school choice for this year. We had a starting balance of a little over $1.3 million. We've always subsidized some of our staffing annually with school choice money, so $250,000. We've supported the first 2 years of the phase-in through school choice at $150,000. We supported this first year, the first year we've had an assistant principal at Shaker Lane for $85,000. Our projected receipts in school choice for this year is $425,000. So when we went through the FY19 budget, we created a little bit of a deficit in the sense that we're spending more than we took in, but it wasn't a lot more, and we still had a healthy reserve of over $1.2 million. However, as we talked about, the SPED out-of-district tuition that we have to support this year, $300,000, is now going to put us projected a little bit below $1 million. That could creep up as we find some efficiencies in the budget, but it's not going to go back up to 1.2. We're not going to find that kind of level of efficiency. But it may be at $1 million again, which is still healthy, but the trend of supporting things like tuition-free full-day kindergarten and other things has been, we've had the luxury of being able to do that and still maintain a healthy reserve, which allowed us to deal with the $300,000 impact on unexpected out-of-district costs, but we're now into a bit of a deficit situation. So we really feel like we need to get that full-day, tuition-free full-day kindergarten that's subsidized by school choice into the appropriated budget. We talked about the operational expenses. Right now, we only project a $10,000 increase on overall operational expenses. That's because we're starting a negotiation with the HVAC service contractor. It's a district-wide contract. It's a 5-year contract, so if it does go up by that amount, it'll be locked in for 5 years. The rest of our operational expenses we expect to keep level or paid for within the current appropriation. We are still aggressively pursuing our cost avoidance energy program, which has been very beneficial to us and has enabled us to basically level fund, operations for quite a few years now. In terms of additional services and staffing, if there was an opportunity to consider that, the next phase injection of cash for the tuition-free full-day kindergarten would be $75,000. We now have 3 assistant principals in the district. The only building that doesn't have one is Russell Street. We have talked a lot about social and emotional learning and supporting students and trying to make sure that they're in a healthy environment in that respect. And we feel like a mental health counselor will go a long way towards doing that. And we do have a part-time HR administrator trying to alleviate some of the workload at central office, which we haven't made any increases in staffing there in quite a while. And then that's within the school department budget. And then, of course, we've been talking about the potential addition of a second school resource officer, which the number I've heard is $75,000. I kind of put that separate just because it wouldn't be in our budget, but it would certainly have an impact on our budget and everybody else's budget if that's the direction we decided to go. Right now, we feel that what we've seen in the previous slides, the school committee is concerned about the amount of increased funding required to meet our current service and staffing levels, especially with that $600,000 increase in out-of-district tuition. We feel strongly that those requirements, the SPED out-of-district and the cost of providing tuition-free kindergarten need to be addressed before we can have a serious discussion on spending any additional staff, spending for additional staff or services. If we can get to a balanced budget that meets all those requirements and there's still an opportunity to do more spending, these are the kinds of things we would want to debate and think about. We haven't had that debate yet because we don't feel like we're there, where there's a really viable opportunity yet because of the increase in SPED and the requirement that we support that phase-in for tuition-free full-day kindergarten, but we're always happy to hear good news. The last slide is just last year at this meeting, there was a question about student population given the amount of housing growth that's going on in Littleton. Subsequent to that discussion, we reviewed a study by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council that Keith Bergman pointed us towards that basically determined that due to demographic trends, the rate of housing unit growth is not a useful predictor of overall enrollment change, nor is rapid housing development a precondition of sudden enrollment increases. And as you can see at the bottom of the chart, over the past 5 years, our student population, including school choice students, which is included in these numbers, grew 3.73%, while Littleton's housing stock grew a little under 11%. Subsequent to last year, when we've obviously had more new homes come online, we actually saw a slight decrease in student population from last year, about 1.37%. School committee continues to evaluate these numbers, and we do see some trends. In the current school year, there are 3 classes with more than 130 students. That's the 1st, 4th, and 5th grade. That's a number that we can support, but definitely gets us on the edge of being comfortable with our current staffing levels. It's only 3 classes, but the 4th and 5th grade together, when they get to the middle school, they will have 3 classes in there for the first time. We've had bubbles move through the middle school.
That's a pretty significant difference between, from year to year. Is any real reason for that? I mean, one's like a 30% increase.
Yeah, it just...
Right next to a 4% increase.
Exactly. It just depends on, when...
Big snowstorm.
Yeah, exactly. When people have children or right, families that move in, families that move in, what grades do they have kids in? It just isn't, there's no real predictor. It's not necessarily an even trend. I mean, typically you would think that people who are relocating and one of their determinant factors is I want to go to a municipality that has a real strong school system are probably elementary age parents. The older parents of older children have already made their determinations, and they're going to stick it out where they are. So you don't see, bigger increases at the middle school and high school. The other thing that you see is from 6th to 7th grade, there's always a attrition because they become eligible for charter school. Parker takes 7th through 12th, so some kids will always go to Parker in 6th grade. The other time you see attrition is from 8th to 9th. Because there's the tech schools and Catholic high schools, prep high schools, and some families in Littleton are obviously always going to take advantage of that. So right now, we think that our average enrollment will continue to be 115 to 130. We don't see it going up over 130 on a regular basis because of the demographic trends of fewer children available to go to public school across the board. That's just the way it is. We'll continue to monitor it, but that's kind of the way we feel, and these numbers bear that out. We see some 130 classes with 130, but it's only 3. And last year we had a big surprise in kindergarten. We had 148. That went down to 137 this year. There was already attrition.
I had a question about, so the kindergarten, you would think, when you're offering full free kindergarten, that the numbers would spike. Have you seen that number spike?
No, because we're already up over 80%. 80% of the kindergartners take advantage of some form of full-day kindergarten. Some do 5 days, some do 4 days, some do 3 days. So, it's conceivable that we would get more 5-day kids once it became tuition-free, because the tuition is obviously on a sliding scale.
Yeah.
And if it's free, then why wouldn't you go all 5 days? But believe it or not, some families are not interested in 5 days of full-day schooling.
Well, I'm interested in the relevance then of free full-day kindergarten because of that. If it's not showing an impact, we're doing it for the students, right?
For the families.
We want to make sure that
Well,
all families
we're
have-
offering full-day kindergarten for the benefit of the students, because there is, it is positive. Although, those positive impacts, when you adjust for socioeconomic factors, sometimes in a community like Littleton, you're getting, diminishing returns on that, versus other communities where those kids really need a leg up and getting into a full-day environment sooner rather than later can make a big difference down the road. But we offer full-day kindergarten because of the benefit. The goal to offer tuition-free full-day kindergarten is for the benefit of the families. I mean, it's public education. That's what it's supposed to be. The problem is that even though the benefits of full-day kindergarten are acknowledged by the state, they don't bother to give you any money to do it. Yeah. You don't get any more money from the state for providing full-day, at least in our community. There are grants available to communities who, need to do that. We don't qualify for them because of our socioeconomic, demographic. But, everybody acknowledges that it's a good idea and we should do it, but the state's like, but you have to do it on your own. You have to cover that nut they're not increasing it. If we did away with full-day kindergarten tomorrow, it's not like the state would ask for money back. They haven't given us any money anyway. If another community who doesn't offer it decided to offer it, they don't get another dollar back from the state for having gone from half-day to full-day. It's just the unfortunate aspect of...
Well,
Mike, when you
not
say,
only-
oh, sorry.
Sorry,
When
go ahead.
you when you say it's for the benefit of the family, what do you mean by that? Can you?
To offer tuition-free full-day kindergarten is
Right.
obviously the families in Littleton who
It's a
pay
financial
taxes.
benefit.
It's a financial benefit. We're
But-
already providing the academic and social benefit
Right.
because we have full-day kindergarten.
Right.
You know, we offer it, and we have been offering it for quite a while, and we scale it, you know, for the families that want to do 3 days or 4 days because they don't think their child is ready for whatever reason to go 5 days, we've allowed for that.
Right.
And
And the families that can't afford kindergarten,
if they qualify
if
for
they
free and reduced
qualify-
lunch, then they're tuition free.
Right.
And we definitely have students that are
Right.
tuition free.
so those
Full day,
families are
they're
taken care of.
tuition-free full day if they.
If they want, yes, if they want to be, they are tuition free
Right.
full day, and they can, again, they can choose whether they want to be a 5-day family, 4-day, 3-day.
So the financial benefit is already there without offering free full-day kindergarten.
For those families.
For those families, yes,
right.
for those families, it's there.
So then now we're offering it to families that don't necessarily qualify.
And the other
that.
part, to me, is always that the state recommends full day, but they don't require it. So even though we
Correct.
talk about full day kindergarten, it's half day kindergarten and half day not, because you have to get the academics in the half a day,
Correct.
because everybody doesn't go to full day.
Right.
So that restricts
and-
us in terms of, not only do they not help, the state's actually restricting what you can do and how you do it, right? In
Yes,
terms of offering a
yeah,
full-day
I would say
program?
that I wouldn't say the state's restricting it, but the model that they've put forward,
Right.
yes, yes.
So, such that the special activities are all in the afternoon.
Correct.
All of the academic, social, emotional development that's required is in the morning.
Yes, exactly.
Rather
So,
than.
so they're really,
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be quite as cavalier about it like that, that there is inherent benefit in academic development to doing art and music and other things. So it's beneficial.
Absolutely.
And it's beyond being a better sixth grade crayon color or painter or a sixth grade tambourine player, a 6-year-old tambourine player, it does have a positive impact. And the socialization aspect of it and their ability to conduct themselves through a full day of school than when they are in first grade. They're more ready for, because then the delivery of academics is over the course of the day.
Right, the
interspersed
curriculum-
with-
And they're
with
with
the
the
curriculum.
teacher all day,
But
Mike,
the
is that correct?
curriculum
I'm sorry.
But it will change now. We don't have to stack it in the morning. If it's free, we can spread the curriculum. out.
No, because the problem is
Required.
not everybody's going to come full day, and not everybody comes 5 days full day.
Right.
You know, you've got
So
that
it's-
3-day, 4-day thing.
So, but if we went to, if we ultimately realized this plan of making fully funded,
5-day,
full,
day.
5-day, full day, can we as a town make it compulsory?
No.
So it will always be academics in the morning?
Until the state decides that it's compulsory.
Instead,
That's
the
the issue.
state
Right.
hinders what we can do.
Right. Yep.
Yep.
so Mike, is there a difference between the kids that are full-time kindergarten versus half-day when they get into first grade? Is there a difference, or is it?
I mean, I can only answer that question anecdotally. We've never measured it. The problem is, it would be difficult to measure in Littleton because you're talking about 120 kids. It's a very small pool to try to make that kind of determination. And there's so many other correlating factors to their academic development at home and everything else. It'd be impossible to truly, make that determination. You could certainly ask the teachers that, yes, the kids that have gone full day are more ready to go full day when they get to first grade, that there's a transition of a month for some kids, maybe half a year for other kids to get comfortable being in school full-time and not getting that rest at 11 o'clock at home the way they do, however families do it, I don't know. But we're cognizant of that, but that's true, even a kid that went full day in kindergarten, because it's kindergarten, now they're full day in first grade, it's a different curriculum, it's different expectations, some of them still struggle, right? It's just natural that some of them are going to struggle. And a lot of that is distributed by when's their birthday, and that's distributed across, the bell curve too. So a lot goes into that. I couldn't, make a determination in Littleton that, yes, we measured it and it's worth 3 points on the 8th grade MCAS test.
Mike, notwithstanding what you just said about small sample sizes and all of that, do you see any movement away from full-day kindergarten because parents don't think that the academic benefits are worth the...
No.
You see sort of a trend,
Right.
largely for some unschooling, right?
Right.
More play for kids. Do you
Right,
see parents
and we're
going
talking
away
about
from it to a
kindergarten,
degree?
and we think we have a strong program that balances the academic requirements. Although, you're right, the academic requirements of kindergarten have changed fairly dramatically for everyone, not just Littleton. And we've tried to be as proactive in helping our students and our families deal with, yes, there is a more focus on particular literacy levels and numeracy levels coming out of kindergarten, but we're going to make sure the kids, are supported while they're working through that, and the families are supported while they're working through that. So there's definitely, there's no trend towards going away from it. There is frustration, as Betsy raised, with, well, we got to cram, for lack of a better term, all of the academics into a half day. But that's true anyway of any half-day program, right? That's you could make an argument that would be beneficial to students down the road if they didn't have to have that much, and you were able to intersperse the day with, hey, let's take a break and go do art. Let's take a break and go to the music room. Let's take a break and do gym, and then come back and do some more numeracy. That would be a much better, I think, personally, way to do it, but we're not afforded that luxury because it's not compulsory. Maybe if you studied it, the right model is 3-day full day, 2-day half day, and that assuages a lot of concerns, Now, some families are going to be like, no, I need my child to be taken care of 5 days a week, 6 hours a day because of our life circumstances. So
There's a daycare component to that, too, right?
I mean, the reason I ask that question, Mike, is that my son is in kindergarten, and at least some of his peers in an anecdotal context would actually prefer exactly what you just described. 3 days full, 2 days half, because
which they could do.
And that's what we take advantage of.
But again,
because
you're still getting the academic component 5 days a week from 9 to 12, or whatever the day is. I don't know exactly 9 to 12 for our half-day program, roughly. So
So stepping back and just take a look at this as a budget meeting. If we were to fund $150,000 over the next 2 years, we're, right now, I think we'd be throwing money at a problem that doesn't exist. Because currently, there's only 14 students that are not engaged in full-day kindergarten under the current.
If that's your reason for going to tuition-free full-day kindergarten, you're correct. But that doesn't necessarily, in my mind, in the school committee's mind, is the reason for doing it. Because you're right, we've never said the reason to do this is to increase the enrollment. Because most of the kids that want, the families that are not doing it, it's probably not a financial decision as much as it's a quality of life. They just don't think that's the right thing for their child. So if that's your reason, that's not the reason. We feel that strongly that because we are an outlier, that public education should be funded through the tax base, and this is public education, and everybody else has acknowledged that fact and come to terms with it in terms of their budgeting and funding. We feel like, as a community, we should too.
Support it, sure. Capital, Mike? Do you mind if I ask one demographic question before? So, Mike, you've talked about how housing growth doesn't necessarily correlate with population changes.
Student population changes.
With student population changes. My read of that study, though, was that school quality does directly correlate
There are
with
definitely
population
things,
changes.
correct. There are definitely things, but
What other variables? and
so
factors?
it's people, is the community community they want to live in because it has the amenities they want, the right housing stock?
Safe.
Is it safe? Does it have access to my workplace? Does it have transit? Does it have a strong school system and other things like that? Those are predictors. But what the study did say was that's going to predict not that you're going to grow, it's going to predict that you're not going to shrink. Because other districts that don't have those, don't meet to check it off, say, yeah, I want to live in Winchendon. Well, why? I mean, it's far away from Boston, it doesn't necessarily have a strong school district. It doesn't have the same amount of amenities because it's a smaller community farther away from population centers, et cetera. So because there are fewer school-age children available to go to school, they're going to lose out. They're going to go down faster because people are going to say no. And they had kids when there were a lot of kids, and like, well, Littleton's maxed out. Ayer's maxed out. I guess I'm going to go live in Winchendon, and we're going to raise our kids in Winchendon. Now you'll see that trend. The families that really make those decisions will come towards Littleton, and we won't go down.
So your read of that then is that the positive economic factors that Littleton has will
Stabilize.
plus or minus
Stabilize the enrollment. So there are communities that will close schools. They will empty the buildings because they don't need them. And when we think about, do we need to add a fifth building? We don't see that. Do we have to maintain our 4 buildings at the current level? Yes. We can't shut a wing because we're going to stay at around that 115 to 130 per grade. for the foreseeable future. So, all right. Capital, so it's two-sided, because the first side that says school capital fund, school projects, are the things that would go into our capital budget, the school department capital budget. It's, this is prioritized 1 through 14. We certainly don't expect to get the whole enchilada. But in terms of priority, our technology, that's something that we try to maintain as we go forward. We're in good shape, but the delivery of technology in the classroom continues to evolve and requires more infrastructure, more equipment. School resources, curriculum, textbooks, professional development, security, radio signal boosters at the 3 schools. And I'm not going to go through each one. You can see where it is. The other stuff is pretty standard material, classroom, furniture, carpets, school maintenance, service van replacement. We replaced our pickup truck. Now the van that we use for our maintenance staff to move stuff around the district is going to have to get replaced at some point. Shaker Lane air conditioning for the CAF area. That building has no air conditioning, and the second floor can get very uncomfortable on those early days and late days of the school year. We just want to, at some point, be able to air condition an area so that if we wanted to pull the kids out of the classroom for a few hours, they can go down the cafeteria. I'll have a comment to make about Shaker Lane in general. When we look at the other side, these are projects that, for the schools, but would be funded through the PMBC capital request and budget. Mostly painting, but you can see after the painting, Shaker Lane elevator replacement. That's a big number. At some point, as a community, we need to think about Shaker Lane. It's the next building on the circuit to get rehabbed. And when we think about, putting an air conditioning unit in or replacing an elevator, and then think about gutting the building, well, maybe not gutting it, but, whether it's a gutting or rehab, would we be more wise to spend money? Don't replace the elevator because it's going to have to get replaced again. That would be foolish, right? Put an air conditioning in it that we're going to air condition the whole building eventually. Why would we put in a separate unit in? So we just, as a school committee, we acknowledge that these things we'd like to see them done. The elevator we might have to get done because that's an ADA thing, but that's an issue that we probably want to grapple with, as a Board of Selectmen, a Fincom, and a PMBC. What's the time, and can we find some efficiencies so we don't spend twice? The other big ticket item on here is the parking lot repaving project. That is a soup to nuts redo of the entire driveway and all the parking service areas and the sidewalks and curbing. So you think about that, you got the lower lot, you've got the middle lot, you've got the upper lot, you've got a very long driveway, and there's a lot of curbing and sidewalks. The curbing and sidewalks are in really rough shape. The drive itself is certainly usable for the next couple of years. And again, but it's a question of, do we keep repairing the sidewalks and repaving those, or do we just get it done all in one fell swoop as part of an overall thing that needs to get done at some point? We don't really expect this to be.
Well, over Russell Street, you did the paving and the curbing this year, I guess, last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing to think about for that is too, if the high school fields are going to be the site of a discharge field for a new sewer system, and that's going to require trucks running up and down, well, I would let the trucks run up and down on the old pavement.
Thank you very much.
I agree.
And maybe there's a way to facilitate the two projects and, again, get some efficiencies of cost and things like that. So it's on the list, but it's down at the bottom.
Is this, in terms of the parking on this whole, the 1.62, is this to be expected for the age and so on, or was it not done well in the beginning?
I would say that for
already?
the actual paving and the drive and the parking lots, yes. The sidewalks, it's unfortunate, the materials that we use just aren't.
Subpar.
Yeah, they're subpar, especially when you got the plow and the truck blades are bouncing off them and salt.
And we saw the same thing in the middle school.
Exactly. It's just,
Not well.
Just on that. So Chris Stoddard and I have reviewed and come up with a plan that if we had the $600,000, that we could do all the sidewalks like we did at the middle school. Middle school sidewalks were all sealed. They were done with all granite curbing. I think we see what happened there. It came out fantastic. the high school is in bad shape, those sidewalks. We've been notified by the Disabilities Commission our commission that we need to address that. So I think if we had the 600,000, we could do all the sidewalks. And like Mike said, we did talk about, it makes really little sense to do anything with the parking lots in the road, especially if we're gonna be doing the sewer with that. So that's, maybe that can be incorporated into that project. But at the very least, I think the $600,000 is something that those sidewalks really need to be addressed.
So Mike, there was talk some time ago about reconfiguring also with this, some of the drop-off areas and whatnot.
I don't know that that was part of the, I guess my answer to that would be not yet, but if we knew we were gonna go forward, then we was, as we started to do the design, we would start to think about, are there modifications
Right.
that would, make the operation of the building on a day-to-day basis
I just
better.
wasn't sure if that
Yeah.
thought process.
I don't think we've gotten that far. I think this was just a rough labor and material for doing the project. What you would do with those labor and materials hasn't been defined in any
But
specific
the
way.
1.6 is Chris's number.
That's right, it's,
Yeah.
and the 600,000 is really the sidewalks number.
That's okay.
All granite curbing.
Okay.
And Chris did design, engineer the whole project for the middle school, so we'd be having him do that, which is a savings to us too.
Okay.
So then we could work with the school department on any adjustments to curbing and ramps and so forth that might make sense.
So my only comment, Mike, is this list doesn't really reflect what Steve Mark sent over to me on Thursday. The only two items on here that are on my list are $50,000 painting the high school and high school window blinds, which I had at 13,000 and we have at 30,000. So we'll have to,
Check with him on that.
Yeah, we'll.
He might be giving you his realistic requests.
Okay.
Relative to what he thinks can actually get done and funded in the current.
As
budget
opposed to the
cycle.
school committee.
Well, we like to put the things on here, even though we know we're not gonna get them, so
Start
we're all,
high.
cognizant that, there are things coming down.
I
down
have
the
things
line.
like HVAC ductwork, second of 3 phases, $30,000, new windows, new window shades. So anyway,
Check with him on.
yeah,
check
we'll,
with him. Coordinate.
we'll get those squared up.
Daryl, certainly get him in the loop on that. We are appointee to the PRC.
Good.
All right.
Yeah, and thanks for the population data. I mean, we've been
Yeah.
sort of trying to look at that for years, and I think.
We'll be talking about it at some of our meetings too, and then translating that in teacher-student ratios and things like that. I think that was relevant for this discussion.
So just to piggyback on that particular comment, is Tommy and Heather's grade was 140 in like
Right.
5th or 6th grade, and
Right.
they're at 111 today.
Right.
So
Right, that was the
there is
first
that
bubble.
attrition.
That was the first bubble, and right, as juniors in high school, that grade went from 140 to 111 through those natural transition points. So I think that was the first time we've seen it. Now we're seeing it enough other times to really say that's
Snowstorms.
reasonably predictive. Yeah, exactly. It's gonna happen, but it works itself out because people make other decisions.
That's one of the things that I hear from people in town. Well, all that building, we're going to need a new school. I hear it all the time, and
Yeah, exactly.
I come back with this. We really need to get that word out to people.
Sorry, then the one other point that I wanted to make, that as a school committee, we're gonna have a debate about, the other point I wanna make, we think that school choice can remain roughly where it is, around 75 to 90 students across all the grades moving forward, because we don't think it's going to be, the resident growth is not going to be as impactful as we may have thought it was going to be. And by virtue of being able to do that, that means that school choice money remains available to, as a reserve and/or some combination of supporting things year by year that we can't get done in the appropriated budget. So that's good news for us, and I think all of us. I don't want to say it's locked in, we got to keep an eye on it, but I'm more optimistic about that than I may have been 2 years ago before we started looking at these numbers.
And our school choice, we're getting families that are choicing in from Acton, from Westbridge, from Groton. It's not just Gare and Shirley anymore. It's
We typically fill every seat that we offer. The only time we don't is if we offer high school seats. You're not gonna get a lot of kids, and you may not want to, because they may be leaving, they may, you know what I mean? So, we're a little more conservative, even though the numbers might say, well, why don't you put 10 more kids in that 111 grade class and get to 121? Well, we don't want to.
10 you don't really want, right?
Right, so, but when we open them up in the elementary grades and even the middle school grades, we get still.
Really good athletes in which case.
A topic for another
Yep.
day, just because we're running so late. Park and Rec came in.
Yep.
And obviously their revenue is down because of alumni.
Yep.
I assume you're beginning to see some kind of revenue stream off alumni, or if you have,
Yes.
will soon.
Yes.
And what we're running into is a gap on field maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the money that they had to go into field maintenance. So what, we had sort of a lively discussion when they were here on,
Your ears are probably better.
you know, should the, most of the fields are on school property.
Correct.
So should the schools, again, you know, start paying for some of that? Should some of the funds that go into alumni go back to take care of the fields on school property?
Yeah.
But, you know, again,
Yeah.
it's not a discussion for today.
It doesn't surprise me. I think that we all realize that once you got some of the youth groups off of grass, you couldn't, in good conscience, and not only could you not in good conscience do it, but in all likelihood, the model would collapse to a degree. So that's inevitable. We certainly are open to having that discussion. I mean, we talk about the school budget, park and rec budget,
Right,
but it's all our pile of money.
It
We've
is.
got to figure out how to make sure we get everything done that we need to do as a town, so that's fine. I might be a little hesitant about transferring, first of all, we're only taking in about $10,000 to $12,000 a year, because we're basically charging 2 youth sports groups, football and lacrosse, for use of alumni. We haven't rented it out, we haven't done camps there, nobody really asked us for that.
Whatever.
Yeah, so, and I would rather build that fund up for whatever we do get for that towards capital maintenance and carpet replacement, and use other funding to, rightfully so, to
As
support
long as
the-
everybody's on the same page.
Exactly, I agree.
I don't care how it
Yeah.
comes out.
That won't be a huge surprise to us that we're gonna have to have that discussion, and we're fully willing to.
But I'd like to have it in timely enough fashion.
Right, before
that
we-
we have agreement on this year's budget.
Yeah.
So we're not going into another budget cycle with this malaise.
I mean, I get that. Obviously, you can see our budget right now, there's stress there. So adding more stress, you know, that's fine, but, you know, something's gonna give sooner or later.
Right, but it's all one bucket of money.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, I just wanted to give you.
Yep, no,
a
that's
heads up.
fine, thank you. All right. Thanks, Mike. All right, enjoy the rest of your day. Or try to. All right, guys.
All right. Moving right along.
You can smell lunch, so.
Only an hour behind, Fred.
Only an hour. Well, this is my last meeting, so it doesn't matter.
So the town clerk has the flu. I don't know if you're aware, but, so she's not gonna be able to make it because she's so full of fever.
I appreciate that.
I told her I would cover her budget, and if you want to, I can do it with my budget at the end of the session.
Yeah.
See, we made up some time.
You didn't make, you just kicked the can down the road, you didn't make up anything.
You're all I'm leaving it through, you guys can finish it out. Okay, CPC,
And I don't see.
we don't see, there's nobody here.
They get nothing. We are moving.
I invited them, and I invited them to our budget.
Historical?
Yeah, I did invite them,
Yeah, they usually come too.
Okay.
Usually does.
All right.
It's only a half hour property.
Okay.
Grab lunch and come
There we
back. And, yeah, let's take 10 minutes and then we'll work through lunch.
And we're gonna meet, we're supposed to, right?